Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see what if Deku was the Prince of Fire Nation, MHAX Avatar. Thanks to the author for making this fantastic fanfic, and I would urge you guys to check out the author's works link in the description and show them some love from our side. Before starting, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. A long time ago. Shoto's soft voice comes in from the garden, and Izuku smiles as he hears the children's gasps of wonder. Water, earth, fire, air. The four nations lived in harmony, just as they do today. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. The children gasp, clearly frightened. Only the Avatar, the master of the four elements, could defeat them. But when the world needed her the most, she vanished. The children's eyes are wide with wonder as Izuku peeks into the room, hiding a grin. Many years passed. Then, my brother and I discovered the new avatar, an airbender named Momo. She was a skilled airbender, but she had a lot more to learn before she could be ready for her destiny. And yet, we believed she could save the world. And she did. So tell us how it happened, Prince Shoto. One of the kids scream, and Izuku's heart wells with fondness as he hears Shoto chuckle. Well, it started when my brother and I went fishing. Izuku chuckled. Funny how the most legendary of tales had mundane beginnings. Then again. Izuku eyes the blue jewel hanging from his love's neck, smiling at it. Hadn't that simple necklace been the start of his happiness? It had all started 10 years ago. Izuku exhaled. These binoculars, really. He squinted through them, taking in the water tribe's frozen landscape. Bile rising in his throat when he knows the fate of the waterbenders living here. Or rather, the fate of the waterbenders who had lived here. Why are we even here? Izuku asks to himself softly, not requiring a response. Haven't we done enough? Izuku wonders, eyes downcast, the scar on his cheek burning with a newfound vengeance. Shoto, stay inside. Natsuo hisses, but Shoto does not listen. It's just the Fire Nation. We don't have waterbenders here. Shoto says loudly, the listening folk sighing in relief, as he pointedly stares at Natsuo, who gives him a very unimpressed glare. Shoto. Natsuo hisses again, but Shoto folds his arms, challenging his brother with a stare. Yes, Shoto is the last waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe. Yes, absolutely. But Shoto would like to see what the Fire Nation's got ashmakers. Good-for-nothing ashmakers that only destroyed and ruined. He grips his mother's betrothal necklace tightly, biting on his lip. I just want to see what everyone is so scared about, Shoto says, evenly. Natsuo looks at him in disbelief. Shoto, you know that the Fire Nation is probably here because of what we did, he says in a low voice, sounding panicked. Shoto rolls his eyes. We found the Avatar, then we let off a flare on the Fire Nation ship, and that was it. I'm pretty sure it's got nothing to do with us. You are incredible. I'm surprised Fuyumi didn't scream our heads off. Natsuo deadpans, making Shoto smirk. Shoto stiffens hearing the marching of Fire Nation soldiers, the smirk on his face be dying as he turns to face them, gritting his jaw and clenching his fists, narrowing his eyes at the invaders. Armor red as the blood they caused to bleed out, and eyes hollow and hidden, they did not present the image they wanted to. All Shoto can feel is hatred, boiling hatred. His own sobs and tears of the past echoed back to his memory in a dizzyingly vivid manner, one he did not like. Shoto feels ice drip from his fingertips before inhaling. At the front marches a fairly tall young man, still shorter than Shoto, however he's wearing the traditional Fire Nation armor, but green curls taper out of his helmet and his face. Shoto blinks. The young man's face is horrific. The lower half of the right side of the young man's face, starting from beneath his eyes, is a deep, scorched purple. One Shoto can recognize all too well. But while Shoto knows his own scar was a terrible accident, this scar screams of violence and horror in a way that causes Shoto's blood to run cold. The young man's face is strong but dark and hollow, speaking of a warrior's past with green eyes that looked out of place with their lifelessness. His left cheek was freckled, and Shoto eyes the scarred cheek once more, a chill trailing down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Citizens of the Water Tribe. The young man says monotonously but courteously. Our ship was attacked. We have information suggesting that, His eyes linger on Shoto, who meets his stare evenly, willing it in himself not to show any sign of recognition. Some of the citizens here have found the avatar. The young man finishes imperiously. Natsuo's biting on his lip, hand on his boomerang. Shoto eyes it and quirks an eyebrow. Why don't you? No, we have to play dumb, that's how they'll leave us alone. We don't have the weapons required to deal with them, and no, one waterbender does not count. Natsuo hisses, barely facing Shoto, but elbowing the younger discreetly. Shoto just shrugs. Why do you have your hand on your boomerang then? Natsuo looks close to exploding before he inhales and exhales twice, closing his eyes while he's at it, before glaring at Shoto with a huff and turning to the Fire Nation group leader. This is just a tribe and it's home. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Natsuo says. He's the oldest man in the tribe at 19, hence nobody protesting at him taking the initiative. Shoto eyes the Fire Nation soldier, gauging his reaction. Oh, I assure you, the young man says smoothly. I'm not mistaken. You can ask the one standing next to you. Shoto freezes, biting on his lip and willing himself not to show surprise, as the young man gave a very unimpressed stare. Natsuo looked at his left, where an innocent child of 5 or so looked up at him curiously, blinking his blue eyes. Natsuo gulped and turned to Shoto, who gave him a very deadpan stare. What did you do? Natsuo snarls. Shoto bites on his lip, rolling his shoulders. I may have thrown a stick of dynamite at his squad so that he wouldn't recognize me. Natsuo facepalms. Shoto, I swear to Tui and La. That's why I keep telling you, we should wage rebellion. Do you have any idea what you just did? I stopped him from apprehending the avatar is what I did. So you can, start, I don't know, thanking me. Don't be obnoxious, you little brat. When have I ever been obnoxious? You're being a little prick right now, ahem. The Fire Lord leader soldier person says, clearing his throat, stopping Natsuo and Shoto from throwing hands with each other. Shoto then eyes Natsuo's boomerang. We could always. Natsuo eyes the boomerang in despair. Well, yeah. We could make a run for it and get ourselves decimated by the Fire Nation. Shoto shrugs. Worth a shot. Natsuo puts his hands to his face. Show, please. I assume you already know what has transpired. The leader calls out, and Shoto and Natsuo stare at him. And I assume you're willing to let them go if I appear in front of you as per your demands. The avatar, Momo, calls out, her voice strong and fierce from a hilltop, making everybody turn to face her in surprise. Natsuo glares at Shoto. This is all your fault. Shoto throws up his hands. Hey, it wasn't my fault. I wanted to know why there was an iceberg. No matter what Natsuo said, it was not his fault. He wanted to know why there was an iceberg, and it wasn't his fault he used his waterbending to defrost the avatar. Absolutely not. Izuku was not having a good time of it. First, the avatar had to instill all those annoying thoughts in his head as if he didn't know Honor had died in the Fire Nation, as if he didn't know what they were doing was wrong, absolutely wrong. She didn't have to tell him all of that. Then those 2 Water Tribe kids had to come and rescue the avatar and risk his father's wrath on him. And now he lost all leads as he searched. Izuku punched the ground in anger, forcing back growls of frustration as he imagined what his father would do to him in light of this recent failure. Obedience will be the master you kneel to, and suffering shall be your teacher, my flesh. By Agni. Izuku groaned out in exhaustion, his head raised up a little only to find something shining from the rubble of the destroyed coal rig. He blinks, getting up and taking it in his hand, inspecting it. It's a Water Tribe betrothal necklace, Izuku realizes, eyes wide. A turquoise jewel hangs off a navy choker, the jewel depicting the fabled ocean spirit and the moon spirit, black and white, following each other in a circle. It glints in the sun enchantingly, and as the sunlight is reflected off by the jewel, Izuku's mind blanks out. I've seen this somewhere. Izuku racks his brains, before his eyes widen. That waterbender. Shoto. He was wearing this. Izuku licks on his scarred lips, frowning. From what he knew about Water Tribe betrothal necklaces, men never wore them. They were crafted by men to the women. And Izuku had heard Shoto speak, so it didn't make any sense for him to be going around wearing a betrothal necklace. Plus, he seemed to be Izuku's age, at the very least. So why? Izuku narrowed his eyes. This was clearly important to the other boy. It could have belonged to his sister, or his mother, and perhaps this was his keepsake of their memory. Because he had no other way to remember them. Something that could be a direct result of the Fire Nation's actions. The thought makes him cold, reminds him of how he aches for a memory, a keepsake of his own mother, and he clenches his free fist. This waterbender, Shoto, could be aching just as he did, perhaps even more, now that it had been lost. I could give it back to him. Izuku inhaled. I should give it back to him. Izuku bit on his lip, an insidious voice sounding like his father's cajoling him. You could track down the avatar with this, couldn't you? He exhaled. That doesn't mean I should. Izuku says, quietly. Shoto was not having a good day. Ever since his mother's necklace had gone missing, Shoto had been in an exceptionally foul mood, that even Momo had started giving him fearful looks. Natsuo, of course, hadn't pushed, simply ignoring him as Shoto brooded in the background. Then today, that stupid waterbending teacher had refused to teach him, so Shoto had to duel with him, lose horribly. Well, Aizawa could sock it even though he admitted he'd take Shoto on as a pupil, steal all the waterbending scrolls, and now he was face to face with fucking pirates. What the hell do you scoundrels want? Shoto asks with a snarl, the pirates jeering at him. Well, little boy, what do you have there? A scroll. Yes, you illiterate idiots, it is in fact a scroll. Shoto says dryly, holding it up tauntingly. The pirates scowl at him and Shoto rolls his eyes before a whip of water surrounds his hands, swirling around. If you want it, you'll have to get past me. Shoto says determinedly. You wanna go, kid? Oh, definitely. Shoto bites out, before pushing both of his hands forward and summoning a blast of water, pushing one pirate straight into the water from the ship. The pirates scream bloody murder, and Shoto shifts his legs and hands into a more ready fighting pose, narrowing his eyes. He had to protect that scroll. Momo had trusted him with it after all, he thinks resolutely. Shoto inhales, before swiping his hand across and out, palm faced towards the pirates. With the movement of his hand, water moves with it from his water gourd, and once he stops moving, the water solidifies into a block of pure ice in midair. Shoto then punches the air in front of him with his other hand, causing the ice block to pummel into the angrily approaching pirates, knocking them all into the water. Isn't this just a kid? One of the pirates scream out in terror. Shoto eyes them evenly. You are pathetic, aren't you all grown-ups? Shoto spits out, raising an eyebrow. The remaining pirates exchange furtive glances. He's just a kid. A kid that can beat your asses. I told you, you want the scroll, you get through me. Shoto threatens, and the pirates growl before launching themselves at him in a very uncoordinated manner. Shoto clicks his tongue, but just then, a blast of fire pushes them all to the ground sideways, causing them to groan. Fire! Shoto registers in horror, the blood rushing out of his face. From the trees, arrives a very familiar figure. Prince Izuku of the Fire Nation. Decked in red armor, he watches them impassively with narrowed eyes, before eyeing the ship once more. It quickly pedals away, and the prince clicks his tongue. Pirates. They're just as bad as my father. The prince says with a sigh. He then turns to face Shoto, before eyeing something in his pocket, then looking at Shoto again, before looking at his pocket, and then looking at Shoto before his mouth falls open and he points at Shoto, clearly trying to say something, before looking at his armor's pocket, patting at it securely before grimacing at Shoto. What do you want? Shoto snarled at the firebender, water swirling around his fist. The prince raised his hands in surrender. I'm not here to fight with you, I came to return something. He says, voice quiet. Oh, please, spare me the theatrics. Shoto hisses, the water quickly solidifying to a sort of ice. The prince eyes it warily. I'm serious, I just want to return you something. The prince says, sounding very tired. Oh, and what would you want to return me? My family. My home. I could go on and on about what you ashmakers stole from me. Shoto growls, dropping the scroll, bearing the sword of ice to the prince's neck, his mother's smile flashing in his mind. The prince's face is pinched and his eyes are somber. You have no reason to believe me, yes, but you should take this back at the very least. He says, taking something out of his pocket and holding it to Shoto's face. Shoto widens his eyes. It's his mother's necklace. He snatches it away from the prince's hand, staring at it in shock. He thought he had lost it, and knowing that he had lost something so precious, the one last reminder of his mother's smile, it had eaten away at him and now it was here and. Why do you have it with you? Shoto hisses out coldly, pushing the sword closer to the prince's neck. I found it when I was trying to look for the avatar. The prince says, voice remorseful. How do you know this belongs to me? Shoto demands, raising an eyebrow and narrowing his eyes as he clutches the necklace harder. The prince blinks, eyes bewildered. Because I saw you wearing it. He says slowly, sounding very confused and unsure of what was going on. Shoto raises both his eyebrows this time, gauging the prince for any hints of deception. To his surprise, he finds none. The prince looks very frazzled, surprisingly. Without the helmet, his green hair curls up and outward in a very unruly manner, completely destroying any attempts that the prince had made to look intimidating during his visit to the water tribe. Green eyes shine with absolute confusion, and he looks as if in dire need for a nap. Shoto blinks, verily confused. But he can't let himself be confused by the enemy. Knowing thus, he narrows his eyes, suspicious. Shoto then slowly lowers his weapon, and it transmutes to water with a rushing sound, before falling flat on the ground and wetting the grass. He holds the prince's gaze as he does so, eyes still narrowed. He then notices the necklace is still in his hand, before putting it around his neck, a comforting and familiar weight. Shoto sighs a little, relieved, before glaring venomously at the prince again. Why did you bother? Shoto asks, folding his arms. The prince smiles gently, but what Shoto had failed to notice before, he notices now the right half of the prince's lips has been burnt out as well, a sickly purple. Every expression the prince makes is grotesque and a part of Shoto twists in sympathy. No one, firebender or not, deserves to have half their face completely burnt out like this. And. How could he still smile like nothing was wrong? How could he spare warmth in that smile of his, even though he was from the Fire Nation? Shoto's head is reeling. It makes Shoto wonder how did a person so young, and a member of the world's most powerful family nonetheless, earn such a horrifying scar. And how could he still smile? That scar had to hurt. It seemed better not to stress it, so why? Who was this guy? It's yours, isn't it? It seemed important to you. The prince says, softly. Shoto's breath hitches, even as the grass rustles warningly in the wind. It's yours. Those words stop his thoughts, briefly. It wasn't his, it had been mother's, but. It's yours, sweetheart. Mommy will always be here for you. Shoto swallows, throat clenching tightly. It's an easy assumption to make for an outsider, but when Shoto meets the prince's eyes, only sincerity glimmer. And that's when it hits Shoto that this prince has some inkling that it is not in fact his, but. Here he is, saying that this memento was indeed Shoto's. Why did you want to return it? Shoto chokes out, eyes wide. The prince's smile grows more sorrowful. Because as you said, the Fire Nation's already stolen a lot from you. It's not. The prince exhales, before meeting Shoto's gaze. It's not honorable for me to take what's not mine. But the Fire Nation has forgotten honor and. He bows. I'm sorry. You deserve to have that much, for everything we've stolen from you. He says, earnestly. So why don't you set yourself free if you think the Fire Nation has forgotten its honor? Shoto asks, a little bit of scorn seeping into his voice. The prince chuckles humorlessly, the smile foreboding and the scar thrown harshly into relief at that moment. Put it simply, if that happens, I'd have to believe I could be free. Believe me, I'm not free. The Fire Lord stomps on freedom. I do what I can. I returned your necklace because I could. I don't know what would befall me if I did anything else, and believe me, I'm not willing to find out. He then eyes the moon, eastward, before sighing. I just wish I was braver than that. Curiosity grapples Shoto, as he registers the deadened, flat tone of the prince's voice, those haunted eyes that remind him of fogged-up mirrors, the reflection behind completely hidden. The prince is hunched up, his eyes holding a hint of fear. Of course it could be an act, but nobody could fake the despair. Shoto swallows. This prince feels complete despair. Despair couldn't be faked, no matter what lengths you went to. Shoto would know. You don't agree with what the Fire Nation is doing? He asks, disbelieving. The prince meets his eyes. I don't. That's when Shoto sees the first flicker of emotion in the prince's eyes. It's sincerity. Shoto, where are you? He can hear Natsuo screaming from somewhere, and Shoto's eyes widen before looking at the prince, who smiles slightly, a little bit of life returning to his eyes, making them shine under the moon. This guy, Shoto thinks, absolutely perplexed. He's in so much pain, clearly, and yet he can still smile like everything's fine. How? You should go. The prince says, quietly. Shoto wants to ask more questions, discern the prince's loyalties, understand what's going on in the Fire Nation, understand why he can still smile even though his eyes are dead inside, so full of despair, the eyes that Shoto had seen in the mirror more than once, but there is a finality in his voice. I should. But you should leave first. Shoto says, voice just as quiet. Whether or not he returned Shoto's necklace, this guy is still the enemy. Shoto can't let his guard down completely, even if the prince seems stupidly sincere. The prince's smile is wry. True. We'll meet again, as my father does have a say in my quest of retrieving the avatar for him. Train well. You have to protect the avatar, she's our last hope. He says, his words hiding the hint of a plea in them. He then, much to Shoto's surprise, actually walks away, and Shoto can see the regularity in his way of his walking, holding himself, and that's how he understands that this young man is truly a prince. Shoto watches him. How strange. Somebody from the Fire Nation, who did the right thing, who believed in the avatar. He then looks at his mother's betrothal necklace, fingering it delicately before closing his eyes, hearing the wind rush past him gently, its way to comfort despite the doubts that now plague Shoto's heart. Shoto. His brother calls, and Shoto can hear his footsteps hurriedly stomping their way to him. He opens his eyes to turn and look at Natsuo, blinking. Natsu. Shoto greets, and Natsuo groans. Where were you? You got mom's necklace back? Natsuo asks, now wide eyes spotting the jewel around Shoto's neck, gaping. Shoto nods, smiling faintly in relief. Yeah. Natsuo sags in relief, grinning broadly as he wraps one arm around Shoto's fur-coated shoulders. That's great. How did you get it back? Prince Izuku's face flashes in Shoto's mind, that melancholic smile which still held a sliver of hope on his face, the moon shining gently down on him. It was in my belt this whole time. Sorry for worrying you. Shoto blurts out, and Natsuo blinks before hollering loudly in laughter, clapping Shoto's back. Oh, Natsu. If only you knew. Shoto thinks guiltily, squeezing his eyes shut, doubts and questions lingering in his mind. Who are you? Prince Izuku. And what is it that you want? The next time Izuku meets the waterbender, Shoto, his name is Shoto, it's at the Spirit Oasis. We meet again. Izuku says ruefully, readying into a battle pose as he faces down the waterbender's unreadable gaze, while the avatar is meditating behind them. I'll have to weaken myself, to give the avatar enough time. Izuku exhales, a breathy trail of steam gushing out of his mouth. That we do. The waterbender says evenly, water streaming out from the gourd attached to his hip. Izuku punches the air in front of him, a stream of fire rushing out. Shoto spins his hands around, one hand following the other, the water swirling around him as a shield, effectively extinguishing the fire. Izuku sweeps his leg out as a kick, sending a ring of fire towards the waterbender, who somersaults backwards, before standing next to the stream surrounding the avatar, both his hands lowered before sweeping upwards, the water moving along with his hands. He then directs the blast of water to the incoming ring of fire towards him, the water freezing around the fire to form a cluster of ice that now drops onto the ground. Shoto then eyes Izuku before summoning another spurt of water, pushing it forwards. Just as Izuku sends a blast of fire to evaporate it, more water streams forward from the collision of their attacks, and Izuku just sees Shoto's hands clenched around each other, before the water pushes him back into a tree, and freezes around him with a hiss. Izuku eyes Shoto, before willing the Kai in him with an inhale, to melt through the ice. Once he does so, he lands to the ground knee and palm first. Shoto then summons more water from the stream, before it solidifies into two swords of ice, readying himself. The sun is rising. Shoto doesn't have much time. You rise with the moon, but I rise with the sun. You should have thought this out more. Izuku says quietly, getting up. I should have, but I can still take you on. Shoto challenges, eyes narrowed. Izuku exhales. So be it. Shoto watches him. If you don't agree with the Fire Nation, why are you here? Why can't you just leave this war? Izuku purses his lips. The thought of fleeing. It's tempting. To flee from this war, and search for his mother, not having to worry about what destruction and havoc will be caused as a result of his actions, but if only it were so simple. Izuku is sure his father will stop at nothing to search for him and torment him even more. If it were that simple, I wouldn't be here. Izuku says heavily. What's stopping you? Shoto asks softly, and Izuku's scar tingles. Fear, Izuku thinks regretfully, before punching the ground, blazes erupting out of the ground, headed for Shoto, who freezes them with a single waving movement of his hand, but it is only momentary, for the flames burst out of the ice and push Shoto back to the ground with a cry. Why can't you just leave this war? Izuku grits his jaw, the scar burning. No one's encouraged him that baldly before, and he squeezes his eyes shut, wondering if this is a sign from Agni, wondering if he should just take his chance, his father's sick glee be damned. When he opens his eyes, he's sickened. The Avatar is there, meditating, vulnerable. Izuku inhales and exhales. He could just. Izuku clenches his fist. He's already done enough. He could just indeed flee. He's tired. Shoto never sees the prince for quite a while after that. After he had come to, he had found the prince missing, but had considered it a win all the whole. It seemed that the prince had quite literally taken his suggestion to flee the war, and Shoto can't blame him. Anyone that traumatized didn't have to fight in the war. Shoto still thinks of him sometimes though. Who's Izuku? Kyoka, the newest member of their little group and Momo's earthbending teacher, asks curiously, as the stars twinkle at them from above at the night sky. Shoto clutches his necklace tightly, biting on his lip as Natsuo shudders exaggeratedly. I think Sho's fought with him more than once. But he's the Fire Nation prince, and he followed us all over the world trying to capture Momo. Kind of a weirdo, Natsuo says, shrugging. Shoto would have been hard-pressed to disagree, but he eyes the necklace, the jewel glinting in the moonlight. It seemed important to you. It's yours, isn't it? He exhales. A weirdo was the right conclusion to come to, at first sight. Because for somebody supposed to be an ashmaker, Izuku didn't seem very inclined to actually use his firebending, nor was he hellbent on causing destruction or conquering anything. He didn't seem as crazy as the other Fire Nation soldiers Shoto had met. Izuku had saved him from the pirates even though Shoto hadn't needed to be saved. Izuku had returned his mother's necklace to him even though Izuku hadn't needed to do so. He just seemed sad. Just how Shoto genuinely was, every time he remembered his mother, his sister and his family's horrendous fates following the day the current Fire Lord had murdered their father, the previous Fire Lord. From there, they had fled to the Southern Water Tribe. It had seemed like they would be safe finally, after all their father had done by killing Tuya and abusing their mother, but then she had gone missing in the raids. Dead, most likely. All that had been left was the necklace Ray had left him, and the kiss on his forehead. Go, sweetheart. Mommy will come back to you. Except she never did. And Shoto had nearly lost her necklace. And Izuku had returned it. Izuku had seemed so sad. So full of despair and melancholy. But he still could manage to spare a smile at Shoto, no matter how weary or melancholic it was. So full of belief in the Avatar. A contradiction. Born from something that he could not name. Sho. Natsuo was calling, and Shoto blinked, sitting up from the ground to look at his lazing older brother. What? He asked, his hair tie slipping from his hair at the movement, causing his hair to tickle his back slightly. Didn't you fight that weird prince? Oh, yeah, Shoto says blandly, necklace still in his hand, heart beating wildly. You're not very talkative today. Momo notes, and Shoto rolls his eyes. I'm not very talkative usually, Momo. He deadpans, before lying back on the ground again, his back to them as he clutched the necklace. He still didn't know who Izuku was, what Izuku was or why he did what he did. But he knew one thing for sure, Izuku was not a terrible person. And that was troubling. Doubtful, Shoto closes his eyes, the last vestiges of Izuku's back to him after having returned the necklace haunting his mind. Logically, Izuku knows that having a very ancient and insane man as his sire would lead to no end of problems for him, but this is far too much for him. Master Oboro is lying unconscious from Tamura's ruthless attack, in the one place where they had thought they'd be safe, though to be fair, Izuku should have realized father would have tried conquering Ba Sing Se next, and now the Avatar's group is here. Izuku just wanted a break. He really just wanted a break. But he knows he's not going to get it, so suffer in silence he must. Izuku is staring at Master Oboro's fallen form in mute horror, and he wants to scream, because Master Oboro was kind. He didn't deserve this, he just followed Izuku, but of course it's Izuku's fault. Master Oboro should have never followed Izuku. All Izuku did was bring pain, pain and more pain. I could heal him. A familiarly deep voice comes from behind Izuku, and he straightens up, turning to look at Shoto, whose eyes are softer than Izuku has ever seen them before. Why you would? Izuku croaks out, and Shoto nods, determined. Of course. Step aside. Shoto commands, and Izuku is bewildered for a moment before scooting away obediently as Shoto kneels before Oboro's fallen body, his hands now resting on the former general's scar. Izuku clenches his fists at the sight of the scar, clenching his jaw. If only Izuku had refused him stronger, or, at least, Izuku should have fended Tamura away, but Tamura had always been skilled at burning everything down to ask, far more talented, far more of a prodigy of chaos while Izuku was sorely useless. Tamura was born lucky. You were lucky to be born, Izuku. Your master will be all right. Sho knows what he's doing, most of the time anyways. Shoto's brother says reassuringly, if not a bit awkwardly. He forces cheer into his voice at the last sentence and Izuku exhales, watching Shoto. His hands glow blue, eyes closed in concentration as the scar on Master Oboro's face slowly fades, color pooling into his face once more. Shoto exhales, the glow around his hands fading. He then gets up, Izuku's eyes wide with awe. The wound wasn't as severe as you feared. Shoto says, words stilted. Izuku blinks, before looking up at Shoto, who shrugs. Thank you. Izuku breathes out, getting up as well. He looks at Oboro, whose eyes flutter before opening fully. He gets up with a groan, and Izuku gasps in relief. Master Oboro. Ow. Did we meet any beautiful women? Oboro asks slowly, making Izuku exhale and roll his eyes, even though a smile is pulling at his lips. No, Master. You got knocked out by a bolt of lightning. Izuku says, tears slipping down from his eyes, as he lets out a shaky laugh. Ow. That sounds painful. Oh. This looks healed. Oboro says, his energy returning as he looks down at his faded scar curiously. You're welcome. Shoto says, and Oboro looks up at him before grinning broadly. Ah, thank you, kiddo. I owe you one. Oboro says cheerfully, winking. Shoto looks very awkward, quite as if he's not sure what to do. Izuku finds himself smiling a bit, even as he sniffs and wipes his tears away, gratitude to Shoto welling up deep within him. Thank you. Thank you so much. Izuku wants to say, but even as he opens his mouth, he finds himself openly sobbing, and he feels warm, muscled arms envelop him. Izuku shakes, sobbing loudly as he hears his mentor whisper soothingly in his ear, what he knows not, but the comfort in those words makes Izuku cry harder. He's okay. He's going to be all right. This is ridiculous. Shoto thinks in irritation, as he spots Izuku reciting an order for tea at the new tea shop that had opened up in Ba Sing Se. This was getting absolutely ridiculous. Was it that Shoto and the others ran into those two Fire Nation fugitives wherever they went? Or was it that these Fire Nation fugitives ran into Shoto? Either way, Shoto found this to be utter nonsense. Shoto exhales out huffily, narrowing his eyes. Clearly, Tamura had been not willing to spare either Izuku or the general alive. It didn't mean they were Momo's allies, but they were not allies of the Fire Nation now either. Shoto bites on his lip, supposing he had better leave them alone. He slowly walks away from the tea shop, not noticing Izuku's wide-eyed stare directed at him, hands sweating. Who are you? Shoto wants to scream out, because this is driving him absolutely nuts. He's supposed to be the enemy, Shoto thinks angrily, not some Not some stupidly kind person who strove to do the right thing. Shoto growls under his breath, punching a hole into an innocent signpost before sighing, exhausted and weary. Izuku wonders why it is that he finds Shoto in his life more often. But he supposes that this is the same person who awoke the Avatar, so he should not be surprised. He sighs, mind in the prison that Tamura's plot had landed him in. I should have known Tamura wanted to conquer Ba Sing Se. We could have fled to the Southern Water Tribe at the very least. Izuku thinks heavily, head low. He gets up slowly, grimacing at how his joints and body ache in pain, noticing Shoto's disbelieving eyes on him. He smiles weakly and rubs himself off. Hi, Izuku asks slowly and very awkwardly, wary at Shoto's unreadable expression. He notes that he doesn't know anything about him, which is dangerous considering they're alone, and Izuku really could use less antagonism at the moment. Shoto exhales. Funny how we keep running into each other. Shoto says, sounding tired. Izuku shrugs, relieved that Shoto doesn't sound intent on attacking him. He supposes that's the one thing he knows about Shoto. He will declare his intentions without any hint of deception. If he was going to attack, he wouldn't have wasted any time. I guess, Izuku says, softly. He then sits down, hugging his knees, the green light of the catacombs ominous. Shoto looks at him, surprised. I don't want to fight you. I've got a choice now to not participate in the war, and I'm choosing to stick by it. Izuku says in answer, not choosing to say that it was Shoto's words that helped him realize he had a choice in the first place. Whether or not the waterbender knew what he said or chose his words with intent, it's that external, outward encouragement that helped Izuku so far to stick with his decision. Yes, Izuku had known his father was inherently terrible, for everything he knew that the older being had done to Tamura and for all the lies he had told Tamura, but all he had needed was the push that Shoto had given him. Why are you still here if you don't want to fight? Shoto eyes him intently, and Izuku meets his gaze, uncertain. Shoto then sighs and sits down on the spot where he's standing. I've tried looking for an escape. It seems that the only escape is through up there from where Tamura threw us, and it's being controlled by him. So I doubt we could escape if we wanted to. Shoto informs, and Izuku is amazed at the other's quick thinking. He nods slowly, now quickly dejected with the information. He exhales. The necklace you returned to me, by the way. Shoto's deep voice shakes him out of his thoughts, and Izuku looks up at him in surprise. It's my mother's, Shoto says, not facing him. Oh. I'm sorry, Izuku says quickly, sorrow filling him. Shoto sighs. It's not like you took away my mother. Plus, you must have been only 9 at the time she was taken away. You couldn't have known or helped. He says, with a shrug. Izuku blinks. Taken away. Shoto nods. During the Southern Water Tribe raids. He says, voice completely void of feeling. Izuku looks down at his boot-clad feet. I'm sorry. That's something we have in common. He says, aching at the thought of his mother's warm smile. Shoto looks at him, eyes wide. The Fire Nation took away your mother as well. Izuku bites on his lip, before meeting Shoto's eyes. Yeah, I was. 10 years old. One night, she hugged me, Izuku's throat constricts. And told me to keep myself safe. And that she would always love me. I didn't understand until she was found missing the next day. I'm sorry. Shoto says sincerely, eyes pained. Izuku exhales. It wasn't the best thing to happen to me, yes. But the Fire Nation isn't what it used to be. Not for a long time. Shoto looks weary. It hasn't been since my father ascended the throne. Izuku blinks, the words strange and confusing as he looks at Shoto. Unable to respond, he takes a note of Shoto's face's distinctive left side consisting of red hair and a blue eye, covered by a scar. Why did that seem so familiar? Oh, you're Fire Lord Enji's son. Izuku bursts out, remembering the man's glare greeting his father. Shoto cringes. Yeah, he wanted his kid to be the Avatar, so he married my mother, who's from the Water Tribe. He just kept having kids until your father showed up and killed him, which to say, good riddance. He abused my mother and killed my oldest brother, or at least that's what Natsuo says. He died when I was just a baby. He explains, looking at Izuku wearily. Izuku winces. Enji had killed one of his own children. That was significantly more terrible than Izuku's own father. Like, yikes. Wow. I knew Fire Lord Enji's rule was terrible. I mean, the courtiers gossiped a lot. I guess he got what was coming for a long while. He says, remembering how they used to whisper about Fire Lord Enji's treatment of his wife and of the mysterious circumstances of the death of his oldest son. So the rumors were true after all. Suddenly, Izuku was a little relieved that his father had killed Enji. They weren't wrong. Shoto says dryly, and Izuku shudders, making Shoto crack a smile. It's a small smile, but it's charming, nonetheless. In all the times he's encountered Shoto, he's seen how the other emotes passionately. But never has he seen the other smile genuinely, and it's fascinating. Fascinating. Charming. What? Izuku's cheeks heat up and he coughs into his fist. He then glances at Shoto, who's watching him with a smile. What? Izuku asks, wanting to hide his face. Shoto shakes his head slowly. You're a good person. Izuku blinks. What? Shoto doesn't back away. Izuku, faintly, registers that the waterbender is very blunt. You helped all of us out whenever you could. Weakening your capabilities so that we could defeat you. You're the blue spirit, aren't you? The one that returned Denki. Shoto says, certainty lightening his voice. Denki. Izuku asks faintly, voice high. Momo's air bison. Shoto says, impressively blank. Izuku widens his eyes further. How did you? Shoto's eyes, enchanting shades of ice and moonstone, dance a little with amusement. You hunted me down just to give my necklace back. It seems like the sort of thing you'd do. Izuku's face is hotter than the hottest candles he's ever touched, and that's saying something. You're just saying that on pure instinct. Izuku asks, voice very high. Shoto chuckles. Izuku is finding this whole experience very bizarre. I'm right, aren't I? Izuku swallows. That's the terrifying thing. Shoto's realized a lot more about him than Izuku's ever realized, and it's terrifying. Yeah, but I'm not a good person. Shoto snorts. That's what a good person would say. Izuku blinks. Did you just make a joke? Izuku asks, blinking. Shoto raised a white eyebrow. I'm very capable of making jokes. Izuku squeaks, and Shoto's eyes dance with amusement once more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay. Shoto says softly, hugging his own knees, smiling. Izuku bites on his lip, nudging his knees with his chin in embarrassment, before peeking out at Shoto, who seems far more relaxed than before. Izuku swallows. Shoto was definitely not what he expected. He didn't expect the other to be so warm and approachable. Izuku's cheeks redden in shame as he eyes Shoto. He was brave, definitely. The way he reached out to Izuku so many times. Shoto was a very kind person, Izuku realized, eyes wide, breath hitching. Can I ask you something? Shoto asks, voice quiet. Izuku blinks, cheeks reddening once more as he looks at Shoto. Yes. Shoto bites on his lip, looking away. You can choose not to answer if you don't want to, but. He then faces Izuku. How did you get your scar? Izuku blinks. He had not been expecting that. He blinks again, fingering the numb skin at the right side of his face, swallowing as the memory of the heat singes him, threatening to make him lose his mind. Again, you don't have to, Shoto tries, sounding hesitant. My father had my brother inflict this on me. Izuku cuts him off quietly, the words out of his mouth before he even registers it. He blinks in surprise and looks at Shoto, whose eyes are wide. Izuku blinks again, surprised to find fury shining in Shoto's eyes. Why? Shoto breathes out, sounding horrified. Izuku palms his scar, exhaling heavily, his own cries of mercy echoing back in his head. I told my father looking for the avatar was a foolish course of action and that what he was doing to the world was wrong. He recollects, closing his eyes. Father, please. Izuku shudders at the memory, heaving in a ragged breath as Shoto's eyes are wide with fury and horror. He looked at me, Izuku says quietly. And asked me why he thought he should listen to me. Izuku glares at the ground before continuing. He swallowed. Told him that he should think of how his actions were affecting others. I told him he lied to me about a better future, because All I could hear was how the generals spoke about being unable to return to their families. I thought of all the people crying in the streets, of all the stories the soldiers would say about the people they conquered. But Izuku swallowed, throat tightening. He told me that I shouldn't worry about that. The next day, however, I kept questioning him. I kept questioning him after that, day after day. One day though, he took me to the dueling arena, telling me he wanted to teach me a lesson. I saw my brother on the other end of the arena, while people were watching us. He spares a moment to look at the growing horror on Shoto's face, before sighing. He told me that he wanted to show me the price of questioning the word of the Fire Lord. And your brother gave you that scar. Shoto breathes out, aghast. Izuku let out a sigh. Yes. There's a silence in the cave, raw and searing. Izuku hugs his knees close to him, the movement giving him a false sense of security. Your father is a scumbag. Shoto spits out and Izuku stares at the waterbender in surprise, not used to somebody insulting his father so openly. The way Shoto says it, with anger soaked in the word, isn't what takes Izuku aback. But there's a small part of him that agrees with Shoto, and that is what takes Izuku aback. He stares, Shoto's jaw clenched, surprised that Shoto would stick up for him like this. Then again, he's a kind person. I guess he is, huh? Izuku jokes weakly, smiling tremulously. Shoto frowns, before scooting closer. Izuku swallows. How did you get yours? He blurts out, before widening his eyes. My what oh. Shoto fingers his scar, it's a pale red, covering his eye. Izuku winces when he fingers it. Much to his surprise, however, Shoto scratches his cheek, looking embarrassed. It's not very tragic, Shoto says, sounding awkward. Izuku finds himself smiling easier at that. Less the tragedy, better, he says, grinning. Shoto stares at him for a moment before shrugging. My mother wanted to make soup for us, Izuku blinks. He had not been expecting soup to factor in this story. So she boiled it pretty well, and put it in a pot for it to cool down just a bit. I was 5 years old at the time. I was really hungry, however, and Shoto looks very sheepish and embarrassed, nose wrinkling. Izuku bites his lip to fight the growing smile on his face. And I ran to the pot. My hands were, Shoto cringes, too small. So when I jumped up and opened the pot, it was way too hot for me and I didn't open it properly. The pot fell over and the soup spilled all over my face, burning it. Shoto finishes, wrinkling his nose further. Izuku stares. Wow. On one hand, Izuku is very sorry that somebody, particularly a 5-year-old, had to experience the pain of hot, boiling soup on their face. On the other hand, it doesn't take much imagination for Izuku to envision a small, 5-year-old Shoto, hand on his stomach as he pouts up at a very gigantic-looking blue pot with soup vapors steaming out of it, big eyes squinting up at it in displeasure. Holy comets, that's one way to get a scar all right. Shoto shrugs. Yeah, I'm sorry. Is it okay now though? It does look healed so. Izuku asks, timidly. Shoto shrugs. It's just boiling soup. Admittedly, it hurt a lot, but it healed well, as you noted. You on the other hand. Izuku squeaks as Shoto scrutinizes him, eyes narrowed. Your scar didn't heal at all. Shoto says softly, looking very angry. Izuku laughs nervously. It doesn't hurt as much as it used to. That's not an improvement. Shoto snaps, and Izuku obediently shuts his mouth. Shoto then sighs, before his eyes soften. Could I heal it for you? Shoto asks gently, and Izuku straightens up fully, inhaling sharply as he stares at Shoto with wide eyes and a slacking jaw. The portion over his burned lips is threatening to tear off with how much he's been opening his mouth today, but the surprise overtakes the pain, completely swallowing it. Could I heal it for you? The words echo in Izuku's head, as he gapes at Shoto. Have this burdensome scar removed. Was that what Shoto was offering him right now? Finally be able to smile without excruciating pain, should he ever want to. Not be reminded of his mother's tears, whenever he saw himself in the mirror. Not cringe away in disgust and repulsion whenever he saw his own face. Why, you're serious? Izuku breathes out, heart beating loudly in his chest. Shoto nods, eyes gentler with kindness. Yeah, I mean, he coughs. That can't be easy to walk around with, for one. For another, I know of a way to heal it. Do you know about the spirit oasis? Izuku blinks, wondering why Shoto is bringing up the spirit oasis now. What? Shoto lets out an amused exhale. The water in the spirit oasis, it can heal any wound. From a splinter to death itself. It would definitely heal your scar, I know it. I have a gourd of it right now. He says, hand on his left hip. Why? Izuku gasps out, tears streaming down his cheeks out of their volition. Shoto blinks and frowns, slightly tilting his head to the side, his ponytail moving with the motion as he does so. What why? Why are you helping me? Izuku gasps out, voice ragged and disbelieving. Shoto's expression softens again, facing Izuku. I told you, you're a good person, Izuku. You helped us out so many times. You don't have to live the rest of your life in misery, you know. The tears keep spilling out of Izuku's eyes, torrential and boiling as he shakes. You would, Izuku babbles out, voice shaking. I would, Shoto says resolutely. Izuku swallows, tears boiling in his eyes, searing them. Shoto. That's when the Avatar and Master Oboro break throughout the prison wall, eyes wide at Shoto and Izuku. Shoto. Izuku. Izuku snaps out of it, before looking at Oboro, who is running up to him and hugging him. From behind them, a lightning bolt strikes and explodes a crystal, and Izuku widens his eyes, looking behind his mentor only to be faced with the sneering face of Tamura. Well, if it isn't the loser brother and the sorry excuse of a general. Betraying the Fire Nation now. Tamura whispers, voice full of malice. Shut your hole, Shigaraki. Shoto snarls, the Avatar's group now surrounding him. Izuku blinks. Shoto certainly didn't mince his words. Oboro releases Izuku, gripping on to his shoulders. Izuku, my boy, you have to choose a side. You cannot dance on both sides of the war. Oboro pleads, looking worried. Izuku swallows. You are a good person, Izuku. Breathing slowly, he looks up at his mentor, the man who trusted him, who followed him. Shoto, who offered to heal his scar, who called him a good person, despite everything. I'll give them better reasons to call me a good person. No, master. I choose. Izuku whispers resolutely, his eyes flickering to Shoto, once, before he meets his mentor's eyes once more. I choose. I choose to be on the side of good. Izuku bellows, confidence filling him, and Oboro's eyes widen before he smirks. Good. I always knew you were pathetic. Izuku can hear Tamura taunting this and more, but no. Izuku had made his choice, once and for all. Shoto's eyes widen when he hears Izuku's proclamation, a smile etching itself onto his face, as the others gape. He's on our side now. Natsuo and Jiro burst out, gaping. Shoto smirks. Yep. The other two exchange a startled look, before shrugging. Momo grins. Well, we have found ourselves a new ally. That's certainly a good thing. We can take Tamura down, no problem. She says confidently, and Shoto grins wider, feeling pride blossom in him at Izuku's determined face. I was hoping you'd say that. Oboro says, smirk growing. Izuku smiles back, even though he can feel the blood seep out of his lips. Oboro frowns at it, but Izuku shakes his head, wiping it off with the back of his fist. Well, here I am. Izuku says, smiling wobblily. Excellent. Let's go. Oboro says, raising his fist for a punch, and Izuku punches it back with a wild grin. Father is going to destroy you, little brother. Tamura taunts, lightning sparking around his outstretched fingers. Izuku snorts, summoning confidence even though his hands are shaking. Father isn't going to do anything to me. I'm not going back to him. He says simply, causing Tamura to raise an eyebrow. We'll see about that. Tamura says calmly, yet clearly nettled as he fires a lightning bolt at Oboro, who redirects it with finesse. Tamura rolls out of the way, blasting blue flames at all of them, causing crystals to splinter. The group scatters in different directions, smoke hazing throughout the prison, and Izuku finds himself stuck with Shoto's brother. Hi. You know how to deal with this guy? Shoto's brother asks him, and Izuku bites on his lip in thought, blood spilling out, causing the older boy to gawk at it. It's ridiculously easy to make him lose his cool. In fact, Izuku exhales, feeling guilty for exploiting his brother's weakness. We could cause him to lose consciousness if we play our cards right. As long as he's calm, he's a threat. He's a ticking time bomb, then. Shoto's brother. Right, his name was Natsuo, asks him, eyes wide. Izuku smiles sardonically. Yep, that's one way to put it. Look. Tamura is fighting against Shoto and the Avatar at once, as they combine both of their waterbending to fend off against his attacks, clearly looking exhausted already, while Oboro runs in to shield them against Tamura, engaging in a battle scene only in the likes of Agni Kai's. Izuku widens his eyes in awe before breathing in and regaining control. Shoto and Momo huddle together, clearly strategizing as Kyoka keeps Tamura on his toes, sending earth and rocks at him at every turn and opportunity. Tamura duels against the both of them with ease. Natsuo bites on his lip. The only thing he seemed pretty annoyed at was you sassing him. Izuku wilts. He hadn't really wanted to do that. He steals his jaw. That's true. He hates me, though I have no idea why. But you're right, if you let me in close, we can cause him to lose his cool to a point he won't know what he's doing. So the plan is for you to annoy him to death. Izuku laughs humorlessly. Basically. He says, and that's when Shoto's arms are encased with water, in a manner reminiscent of an octopus. The Dai Li hurries in at that moment, and Momo blasts them away with a funnel of air with one hand, while Shoto fends them off with tentacles of water. Oboro and Kyoka are battling against Tamura, but Kyoka is clearly getting winded. Shoto takes over, and Izuku and Natsuo nod before running at the approaching Dai Li. Natsuo takes out his sword, battling against the Dai Li agents while Izuku gets near Shoto, whose watery arms are standing against Tamura's brutal assault of lightning. Izuku notices Oboro and Kyoka leaning against a crystal wall, now helpless. Shoto. The others need help. Let me handle him. Izuku calls, and Shoto pauses momentarily, but not before jumping back and slamming his extended watery arms on the ground, causing a shockwave to erupt to Tamura, who dodges it efficiently and fires a blast of blue flames towards them. Izuku shields them from it by holding his palm out in front, flames spiraling out to cancel out Tamura's own. It works only to a degree, but Shoto freezes the other flames, causing them to stand still as statues. Got it, Shoto says, nodding and running off to Oboro and Kyoka. Izuku grits his jaw. If Tamura's got to Oboro, I'm willing to not burn you even more than you already did, if you're willing to grovel. Tamura says with a sneer, eyes already a little unhinged, fingers twitching and glowing with lightning. Grovel where? Izuku asks dryly, readying into a stance, fists out and burning. You little brat, when did you get so mouthy? Weren't you just a worthless little weakling who blubbered all the time like a pathetic loser? Izuku does his very best to not let the words sting him. And weren't you above petty insults? Fight me already. He growls out, making Tamura smile rabidly at him. Izuku is not going to lie, that smile is unnerving him already. Steady, he reminds himself, letting the Kai flow in him. If you want to get burned so badly, weakling. Tamura snarls out, before grinning. He fires a bolt of lightning and Izuku grits his jaw, before stretching out two fingers in front of him, the ones burnt, the scarred ones. His mind briefly warns him, but the lightning hits his body before he even knows what's happened, and Izuku forces the lightning out of him. Out! Izuku screams in his head, against the searing pain, and the lightning flows out of him, to Tamura's slack-jawed surprise, and he somersaults away from the blast, causing an entire wall to explode. Tamura then narrows his eyes, and Izuku heaves a breath, the pain lingering and burning him tenfold, but gritting his jaw, he gets back up, only to notice Tamura's intent eyes. He turns with a scowl only to widen his eyes at what they're all seeing. It's the Avatar's true form. Her eyes are glowing a pale white, and all the four elements are swirling around her, and Izuku, through the haze of pain in his mind, registers it with a sense of awe that he will never forget. Amazing. Izuku breathes out, hope renewed in him anew as he grins up at the sight, before he blinks. Something's wrong. He could feel Kai moving. Something is deathly wrong, and Izuku inhales sharply, remembering that Tamura hadn't been hit by his attack before turning to see Tamura smirk maliciously, and he widens his eyes. The Avatar state. If the Avatar was hit in this state of power, then they would. This was Father's goal all along, and Izuku's body moved before he knew what he was doing. hearing Izuku scream in agony just as Momo awakened her true power. Shoto turned from where he had been healing Oboro and Kyoka, only to see Izuku's body struck with lightning, and fall lifelessly to the ground. Shoto moves before he thinks, running and nearly tripping twice or thrice on his way, horrified as he gathers Izuku's body in his arms. Izuku! Shoto screams mindlessly, but Izuku lets out a feeble groan and Shoto regains his breathing, hands shaking badly. He lays Izuku on the ground and without thinking, takes out the gourd containing the water from the spirit oasis, hands shaking as he spills it all over Izuku's abdomen, hurriedly placing his shaking palms on it, willing it to just heal already, spirits. Heal, heal, damn it. Shoto curses in his head, as Izuku's jaw is slack, blood seeping out from his nose and lips. His hands glow brightly, ripples of water forming on Izuku's body, and the scars on the wounded firebender's abdomen slowly lose their color. Shoto's eyes catch the scar on Izuku's face, before quickly placing one hand on his abdomen and the other on the now lifeless boy's face, closing his eyes tightly and healing as best as he could. Shoto's losing energy with each second, sweat dripping down his face, tears now unwillingly spilling down. The others are yelling at him. Shoto! Shoto! Come on, take Izuku and just go. Couldn't they see that Izuku was hurt for so long, when all he wanted to do was the right thing, and he always got punished for doing so? Why couldn't they just let him heal Izuku? Why couldn't Izuku just be healed? Izuku breathes, drawing a ragged breath of air and Shoto gasps sharply. Izuku! Shoto whispers, and Izuku gets up gingerly with a groan, before looking at Shoto with wide eyes. Shoto! Izuku weakly croaks out, and Shoto could cry. Izuku! You idiot! Shoto hisses out, voice raspy due to the tears as he now impatiently wipes them away with one hand. Izuku blinks before smiling sheepishly, that damn smile. I'm sorry, he says, softly. No, you're not, Shoto rasps out, and Izuku laughs in surprise. How'd you figure? Shoto just shakes his head, wiping his tears. You've never been sorry about doing the right thing, have you? Izuku grins back, rubbing the back of his head. No, I suppose not. He says, sheepishly but with an unwavering, captivating confidence that leaves Shoto momentarily breathless in awe. Still we have to get going, the Dai Li. Shoto says, in an attempt to regain control of the situation. Izuku then blinks, as Shoto guiltily looks down at the star-shaped scar across Izuku's abdomen. He then takes his hand from Izuku's cheek only to gasp. Izuku notices Shoto gasping, before blinking and touching his cheek, gasping as well. He widens his eyes to the size of saucers, gaping as he now strokes his now unburnt cheek, fingers on his now unburnt lips, hurriedly touching them repeatedly. He then looks at Shoto. You did it, he says, voice tinged with awe. Shoto swallows, looking at Izuku in confusion. Of course he did. He had promised Izuku after all. What was the point of promising something if you didn't stick by it? He quirks an eyebrow at Izuku. Of course I did, Shoto says, simply. Izuku then hugs him tightly, stealing the breath right out of Shoto's lungs and soul. Shoto wheezes, eyes wide with surprise, before he looks at Izuku sniffing and shaking, tears wetting Shoto's sarashi, and he smiles softly before hugging Izuku back. That's it, Natsuo yells, but Shoto, still in Izuku's warm embrace, closes his eyes and doesn't heed a word. Izuku smells like smoke and ash, but there is also that warm scent of incense surrounding him. His arms are strong and sinewy, encompassing Shoto fully despite his shorter stature, head resting against Shoto's chest. I'm here, Izuku sobs, and Shoto buries his face into the other's neck, taking comfort in that fact. His friend was here, he wouldn't leave Shoto. I know, Shoto murmurs, tears stinging at his eyes. There's a silence, for a moment before one of them breaks it again. Thank you, Izuku whispers in Shoto's ear, and Shoto just smiles broadly, eyes closed shut. We should probably get going, Shoto murmurs, and Izuku pulls back immediately, face redder than his clothes. All right, finally, out of here, you two. Do you want us to get arrested? Natsuo shrieks at an unholy volume, clearly trying to fend off the Dai Li. Shoto snickers as Izuku squeaks in refusal, both of them getting up and running towards and impatiently snorting Denki. That's when Shoto takes a look at Izuku, fondness swelling in him at the sight of the other hurriedly running towards the air bison. A lot of things happened since the Ba Sing Se disaster. Ochako, a runaway Nana warrior, is now a part of their group officially. Oboros with the Dai Li, unfortunately, and Izuku's become an official part of their group as well. Yet, Momo is finding Izuku to be a very good teacher. He's patient, doesn't lose his temper, and teaches her all he has to know. What Momo is finding absolutely amazing is that Shoto and Izuku are even more joined at the hip during their camp nights. It's always Izuku that Shoto sits next to. Only Izuku will get any of Shoto's food, and only Izuku will get talked to by Shoto. It's amazing how much they have in common despite being vastly different. Momo's glad Shoto's never had a close connection with anybody in the group save for Natsuo, and to see him smiling, laughing at their nights out is pleasing for her to see. It's nice to see that Shoto has a good friend. Of course, Kyoka realizes blandly, they were not just good friends. Kyoka is perceptive. That's how she's a good earthbender. But sometimes, knowing too much can be a little discomforting. She hears it in the way Shoto lowers his voice to a more intimate volume whenever talking to Izuku, whatever it may be about. Shoto's voice is always softer when talking to Izuku. And Izuku, for his part, he always gives Shoto a fond smile when the other is doing anything. From drinking soup to healing minor wounds to sharing his opinion, Shoto always gets an unnoticed smile from Izuku. Yep, they were not just friends. Now if only Momo understood that those two weren't certainly just friends, and that she, Kyoka, did not want to be just friends with Momo either. Yes, there's a war going on, but Kyoka just wanted to be with Momo, okay. And if those two bozos could do it, then Kyoka could too. Natsuo is very wary. He did not like the way Shoto's eyes lingered on Izuku for far too long even when the little dude was doing nothing in particular. The guy could stand, and Shoto would still be staring at him with this disgustingly soft look on his face. That was way too much for friendship. Natsuo wondered if he should listen to those older sibling instincts and scream at Izuku to stay the freezing heck away from his baby brother, because that was sweet little Shoto, who used to grin up at him with chubby cheeks, slurp soup and noodles like a baby, and it's hard to see him grow up like this, in the midst of war. Which is why Natsuo knows deep in his heart that it's good to see someone like Izuku reach out to Shoto. Of course, there's no way he's admitting that. Natsuo is slowly losing his mind and warier than before. You just don't want Izuku with us because he's in love with your brother. I don't want him around because Shoto looking at him when he's shirtless. That whole cave dance party back in the Fire Nation. He was giving the guy bedroom eyes. When the guy was dancing. Natsuo grumbles, folding his arms. Ochako blushes. Natsuo stares at her. Oh right, you were giving the twerp bedroom eyes too. No, I didn't. Ochako shrieks, slapping Natsuo's arm with a force befitting her strength as a Nana warrior, and ow, that was a lot of strength. Natsuo hated them all. Ochako pouts. Natsuo grins before sighing at the way Shoto blushed at a particularly vigorous technique Izuku was using right now, causing his muscles to bulge a little. And while Natsuo does respect Izuku for being very fit, right now however, he does not like the fact the baby-faced twerp has a lot of muscles. Especially when his little brother was ogling at said muscles. I didn't even know Shoto knew what bedroom eyes meant. Natsuo grumbles, and Ochako wheezes, quite over her embarrassment at the sight of his absolute, utter misery. Brat. Well, he certainly does look at them. Ochako coos, as Shoto's eyes are on Izuku the whole time he's teaching Momo how to firebend. It does not help that Izuku is shirtless. At all. Shoto's eyes are half-lidded, even as he keeps focusing on his waterbending, water swirling around his hands slowly, while side-eyeing Izuku a little too suggestively all the time, and Natsuo wants to choke himself to death. The sad thing is, Shoto probably doesn't even know what he's doing. Shoto's never had crushes before, or even if he has, probably not one like this, where he's head over heels, thinks nothing except about said crush, and just exists with an empty head. Despite knowing all this, Natsuo still does not approve. He did not deserve this. At all. Natsuo is very close to an aneurysm. No more of the bedroom eyes. I don't need to know that my baby brother can give bedroom eyes. Natsuo screeches, and Ochako sniggers, laughing herself to death. Ochako is finding this group very fun. Never mind the fact that Izuku was the same one who nearly ruined Nana Island in his attempt to search for Momo. She can see that he's genuinely remorseful for it. But anyways, the fun thing was the budding romance between a certain waterbender and firebender, which was terribly romantic, because fire and water. Oma and Shu. It was beautiful. Shoto wants to talk to you. She says to Izuku in a low whisper, and Izuku screeches to high heaven, jumping and scuttling a good 10 feet away from her. Where did you come from? Izuku screams, back to his tent's wall. Ochako grins. The other end of the tent. Izuku squints at her suspiciously. Ochako grins wider. You like him, don't you? Izuku's face glows an interesting shade of red as steam wafts out of his ears and nose. Well, yes, literally speaking, I do like Shoto very much. You know he's my best friend, a very skilled waterbender, great at fighting, an amazing healer. I'd know, he's healed me a lot of times, it's amazing talking to him, he's a great friend, the best, really, oh yeah, I know that he's my best friend but also, Izuku's hands wildly gesticulate as he speaks, moving this way and that. It's nothing short of entertaining. He's really kind and sweet even though he doesn't seem it, but he's such a good person and yeah, I do like him, so I don't understand why you'd ask me this, because it should be obvious. Yep, you have it hard. Ochako says sympathetically, brushing away the fact his muttering was weird as hell. Izuku screams, going up into literal flames. It would have been concerning if the tent caught fire, but he probably must have figured this would happen because the tent hasn't gone up in flames and he was the one who bought said tent either way. This is leading nowhere. Shoto, if I may. Momo says, sympathetically. What is? Shoto asks, frowning at her as he washes his hair. Momo sighs, eyes shifting to where Izuku's face is a very bright shade of red, trying very badly not to look at Shoto. Ochako is ribbing him with a grin. Shoto stares at Momo. I have no idea what you're talking about. He lies, like a liar. Momo raises an eyebrow. What was it that fortune teller predicted about your future life partner? She asks with a teasing grin, giggling. Shoto's eyes widen, the lake immediately starting to freeze. Momo grinned and Shoto narrows his eyes, even though he's mentally checking them out one by one. Well, Sunny, your future partner. This is looking good. Get on with it, lady. Natsuo whines. Shoto just shrugs, hiding his mild curiosity. The fortune teller grins in delight. Well, young man, you'd be marrying a tall. Izuku was shorter than him though. Izuku was 16, that's not the age at which a man reached his full height, so Shoto supposes he'll be patient. Powerful bender. If that wasn't true, Shoto didn't know what was. Izuku was a very powerful bender, as he had later proved himself to be. The way he could control the fire even without the assistance of the sun. Who's really handsome? Well, Shoto thought with a cough. Izuku was very handsome, yes. And, when they finally believe in themselves, they will find the one they love. As in, you. Shoto did not pout. But he couldn't help but hope, as he sees across the lake to where Izuku is now laughing at some joke Natsuo was cracking. Momo falls into the unfrozen part of the lake, still laughing at the expression on Shoto's face. Kyoka watches in awe as Izuku and Shoto work in tandem to bring down Shoto's older brother. Long story, he wasn't dead and he just wanted to serve the dude who killed his own dad. Yeah, very messed up. Kyoka's aware, fire and water dancing around them as they fend off against the guy. Shoto extinguishes Dabi's flames with aggressive water bending, while Izuku moves around, jumping and dodging whenever he can to try to deal a fatal physical blow to the firebender. Once, Shoto freezes the area around them, he slides past Dabi on the iced ship, causing the other to turn around to blast him with blue flames, but that's when Izuku soundly knocks him out with a flaming drop kick on his neck from behind, causing the firebender to get knocked out cold. One down. Shoto shouts, before he and Izuku run over to Tamura, who growls at this, and Kyoka just grins. You couldn't beat those two even if you wanted to. The fact that Natsuo's mother is alive. Alive after so long. Natsuo can't help it, he sobs into her like a baby as she hugs both him and Shoto, her own tears caught on Natsuo's coat. Oh, my boys, my sweet boys, Rei sobs, and Natsuo sniffs, hugging her and Shoto tightly. I wish Fuyumi was here too. Natsuo thinks sadly, but that's when he clenches his jaw, resolving and remembering why they were all fighting. They had to end this war. No matter what, so that they could all go back home. Natsuo pulls back, smiling at his mother. It's so good to see you, Mom. Rei smiles beautifully at them both, hand on Shoto's head. As it is wonderful to see you both. Where was that young firebender, Natsu? Shoto blinks, looking up at Natsuo in surprise. Izuku was here with you. Natsuo scoffs. Calm down, you were the first thing he thought of, going all. For Shoto's sake, I hope we find your mother. He teases, smirking. Rei looks very interested as Shoto's face turns a shade of red similar to his hair. Did he really say that? Shoto asks, eyes wide and voice shy. Natsuo snorts. Course he did. And that's what you want to know. Seriously. You're not helping your case here. Fine. I'm leaving to find our mother because I saw her at the Boiling Rock. You happy now? Natsuo yells, throwing down his gear. Izuku regards him from where he's standing, and that's the first time Natsuo realizes that Izuku is in fact a prince, and therefore knows how to look scary and unimpressed and basically broody. Izuku looks very unimpressed and stern, his eyebrows are furrowed into a little line, eyes narrowed and his mouth is downturned. I'm never happy. Izuku deadpans, and Natsuo snorts. Don't lie to me, you little twerp. You practically go goo goo eyes the second you see my little brother. And it's gross, spirits. Natsuo accuses, pointing a finger at Izuku, whose face turns red. That's not Shoto, has nothing to do with this. Speaking of Shoto, anyway, I hope that for Shoto's sake, we find your mother. Izuku grumbles, getting down from the platform. Natsuo scoffs. Has nothing to do with this, my foot. He mutters, disgruntled. Izuku stares at him, absolutely betrayed. Shoto scowls at Natsuo, making him blow a raspberry in retaliation. Izuku. Is he Shoto's friend? Rei asks, voice very indulgent and curious. Natsuo grins. Why don't you ask Mom? Shoto stomps on his foot just as he heads out, face very red as he hisses out, Natsuo. In a very embarrassed voice. Natsuo smirks, jogging off. So who is Izuku, dear? Rei asks with a fond smile, hand gently combing through Shoto's hair. Shoto's face turns redder and Rei laughs. Too long had it been since she had seen all of her precious children, Shoto in particular, for too long. She had borne the pain of having left a crying Shoto in the middle of the Water Tribe, all while the Fire Nation soldiers had dragged her away to their prison, a prison Rei had hoped she would never see again. Thankfully, thanks to Shoto and the other Northern Water Tribe waterbenders, a breakout had been engineered successfully. She smiled to see Shoto scratching his cheek in embarrassment. Her beautiful son, he had grown up well. Rei was particularly fond of the fact his hair was long enough for her to comb her fingers through, she thought it suited him. The scar had healed well too, thank the spirits. He's the Avatar's firebending teacher. And my best friend. Shoto finally answers, and Rei raises an eyebrow in curiosity, already approving. Oh, how did you two meet? She asks, indulging him in his denial for now. Shoto lets out an amused breath, a soft smile stretching across his face in a way that made Rei's heart sing with joy and anticipation. Well, he's actually the Fire Nation prince. His father assigned him to capture the Avatar, but he didn't want to do it in the slight. He's always known that what the Fire Nation did was wrong. Shoto explains, and from there he tells how he had met Izuku repeatedly until. I'm sorry I lost it. Shoto says, now bowing his head, clutching at his necklace tightly. Rei's heart squeezes as she strokes Shoto's head soothingly. Hush, Shoto. It's yours, now, child, if you'll have it. And it came back to you, didn't it? Shoto looks at her, eyes momentarily wide, before he smiles widely, his eyes shining in a way that warms her. Thank you, Mom. And as to how it came back, Shoto's hold on his necklace is gentle and reverent in a way Rei hasn't seen. Izuku was the one who gave it back to me. Oh my, Rei thinks, blinking. That, she had not expected. No wonder. No one would have expected a firebender to give them back something that didn't belong to them, and yet, this boy, Izuku, had done so. It must have confused Shoto, but at the end, he had been able to look past that and sense that Izuku was indeed someone trustworthy. Rei smiles, feeling proud of Shoto. This couldn't have been easy. Rei knows it as well as the scars her years at the Fire Nation have given her, yet her son had managed to extend his kindness to a boy who had most likely needed it. Shoto speaks further, about their time at Ba Sing Se, all their trials and tribulations so far, and Rei notes that the fondness in his voice when he's talking about Izuku is visceral and real, a sweet thing that fills Rei's soul with a steady hope in the future. She notes the way the lines around his youthful face tighten when he talks about Izuku's sacrifice, the way his throat almost chokes as he speaks about the lifelessness in Izuku that had frightened him so, and Rei's heart twinges, soothingly caressing Shoto's forehead as his voice shakes with anguish. What she also notes is the way Shoto smiles as he talks about Izuku's like of spicy food, the way Izuku goes on tangents sometimes. Mom, did you know that Izuku recites verses from the books of the libraries in the Fire Nation flawlessly, and oh, isn't it a beautiful thing? To see her son so clearly head over heels. Shoto pauses for a moment, now having sat a distance away from his mother. His hands clasp each other tightly, and a frosty mist escapes his mouth as he sighs. Shoto. Rei prods gently, curious. Shoto sighs again, looking awkward. I'm pretty sure I feel more than just friendship for him. Kind of. Similar to the crushes Fuyumi's talked about. He says, very hesitantly. His hands clasp and relax as he speaks and Rei smiles. As that's so? She asks softly, smiling wider. Shoto's cheeks flush pink. I suppose. He says, voice very small. Rei laughs, hugging Shoto, whose eyes widen in surprise. Whatever happens, Shoto, know that I will always love you, she reassures him gently, feeling him relax in her embrace. Rei strokes his head, closing her eyes. And I am sure that Izuku thinks of you just as fondly too. Shoto blinks as Rei pulls back, surprised. You think so? Rei giggles. Dear, if what Natsu said was any indication, then certainly, yes. Shoto's face reddens, scowling as Rei laughs. I'm only joking. Shoto, Rei says, voice appeasing. Shoto pouts, squinting downwards as his ears turn red, huffing a little. Natsu should just keep his trap shut. Shoto mumbles and Rei laughs, truly joyful. I do hope Shoto finds the love he seeks, Rei thinks to herself, fondly. I should have known you were the painted spirit. Shoto jumps, eyes wide as he turns back to face Izuku, who is dressed in black with a katana sheathed, giving him a very unimpressed look. Wah! Izuku has his hands on his hips, looking quite unsurprisingly like a reproving Momo. Which question do you want me to answer first? Izuku asks, dryly. Shoto takes off his hat, staring at Izuku. Maybe you should start off with the one where you admit if you followed me or not. Izuku's face pinkens. I'm sorry. He rubs the back of his neck sheepishly. I did follow you, I guess. But I was worried, he says, frowning. Because every time the painted spirit appears, you disappear. Shoto blinks, eyes wide. How did you know that? Izuku smirks wryly, holding up a blue theater mask. Shoto stares, ready to smack his own forehead. Duh. Shoto groans out, sitting on the rock with a huff. Izuku laughs, but his smirk softens to a smile. You should be a little less smug next time you hear your alter ego did something. He says, voice shaking with mirth. Shoto squints at him in annoyance. Ha ha. Very funny. Izuku grins, sitting next to him. It is kind of funny, Shoto. Shoto shoves him, face redder than the face paint on it. Izuku just laughs further, and Shoto finally lets out a small chuckle at the end, even as he hugs his bared knees. For a moment, there is silence. Shoto can't hear anything save for the leaves that get rustled by the wind. Shoto knows that whatever the question he wants to ask, he already has the answer. Izuku isn't going to tell the others, nor is Izuku going to ask him any questions because he's the only one who understands, and that is perhaps what makes Shoto fall in love with him just a little bit more. It's love, then, huh? Your secret's safe with me. Izuku says hesitantly, interrupting the silence. Shoto snorts a little, feeling warm. He glances at Izuku from where he's resting his chin at the crook of his knees, and smiles. I know, Shoto says, trying not to sound too smug or knowing. He supposes he fails because he can hear Izuku choke in surprise next to him. He misses the blush splayed across Izuku's moonlit face. When Shoto confesses to the others that he was in fact the painted spirit, Izuku is the first to defend him, despite Natsuo's protests that they were straying from the plan required to scout the Fire Nation. Shoto and Natsuo glare at each other, the latter ready to scold Shoto once more, but that's when Izuku steps in. It's not like he did something wrong. He just healed a poisonous lake, you know. Izuku says softly, but firmly. Natsuo throws up his hands. We don't have time to help all these people. Shoto jerks a thumb to himself, glaring at Natsuo. You can't knock me down from doing the right thing. Those people needed help, and somebody had to do it. Natsuo freezes, surprised as everyone else gapes at Shoto. But all Izuku can feel is awe and admiration for his friend. The fact Shoto knew what he had to do, the confidence is staggering, and Izuku believes he could be brave as Shoto too one day. Now, if Izuku was going to watch a badly depicted satirical play about their first adventures in the water tribes, he at least needs something to cover his ears. He knows this particular troupe, considering they had botched a beautiful play about dragons and their emotions, much to his mother's discomfort and Izuku's warranted dismay. I'm telling you guys, this is going to be horrible. Izuku says, dryly. Natsuo shrugs, already having some snacks with him. Everything about the Fire Nation is horrible except you. He says, grinning. Izuku gives him an unimpressed look, making Natsuo snicker. That much he's right about. Ochako says cheerfully, with a smile. Guys, Izuku says, unable to fight the grin on his face. He sees Momo and Shoto hurriedly whispering about something with a smile on his own face, before they all settle into their seats to watch the play. The play, as Izuku had predicted, was atrocious. First off, Momo is portrayed by a muscular man who flexes his muscles at every turn with a lemur on his shoulders for some reason, leaving the real Momo quite aghast. Momo moans and hides her face behind her hands even as Kyoka reassuringly pats her back, trying not to laugh. Natsuo is portrayed by a wispy boy with a badly placed white wig, acting quite timid and meek in the play, causing the real Natsuo to gape at this caricature of a depiction, the rice balls in his hinged jaw. You're not supposed to eat in the theater. Izuku says, looking scandalized. Natsuo shrugs. It's a Fire Nation theater. Izuku sighs. Tui and La, you were right, this is terrible. Natsuo whispers, horrified. I told you. Izuku says, very wisely. Natsuo stares, eye twitching as the actor portraying him bursts into tears when told by Shoto's actress. Shoto had shrugged it off, not particularly concerned and commenting about how it was only because he had long hair, that he couldn't bend and should therefore stay out of the battle. Do they even know I'm the one telling Shoto to back off? Natsuo hisses out and Izuku chuckles nervously. It's a satire written by the Fire Nation, Natsuo. You can't expect it to be right. Izuku says, reassuringly. Natsuo huffs. But they can make my brother good looking. Shoto, sitting right next to Izuku on the other side, simply slurps his noodles in response. Izuku has no idea where Shoto got those from. Natsuo's eye twitches again. Ochako is portrayed, quite accurately, a bubbly brown-haired girl with the traditional Nana warrior makeup who easily defeats any foe that comes across her way. Ochako smirks, very pleased. Good to know they got me right. Ochako says, grinning. Didn't you get defeated by Himiko? Kyoka starts, eyebrow raised, but by then Ochako huffs and turns away, pouting. Kyoka just stares at her awkwardly. Natsuo and Ochako exchange a meaningful look when she's portrayed as being rather hostile to Izuku. Natsuo waggling his eyebrows with a smirk while Ochako's face is red, for some reason. Izuku is concerned, but his concern is waved away when asked. Shrugging, he goes back to staring at this travesty of a play. Kyoka is portrayed as a deaf girl for some strange reason, but she still is portrayed favorably, by someone resembling her to a degree. Kyoka just smiles in relief, while Momo smiles at her as well, relieved. The real issue starts when Izuku, portrayed rather terribly as expected, by a small boy. Izuku was not that small. Agni, who seems to believe that Izuku's only trait is crying when things don't go his way, which isn't accurate so much as rather insulting, but Izuku shrugs it off. The mortifying part is watching a twisted version of himself soundly kiss Shoto's actress. Izuku still couldn't wrap his head around that one, in a terrible rendition of the events that occurred in Ba Sing Se's catacombs. Izuku can feel steam wafting out of his ears and his body heating up. Did you guys kiss? Ochako gasps out, and Izuku bites on his lip, trying hard not to scream and not to face Shoto, as a result of which he doesn't notice Shoto choking on his noodles. We did not. Izuku screeches, hiding his face by framing it with his arms. The fact that the actors are saying something like, "I will never leave you, beloved, I would betray my country for you," does not help Izuku at all. He timidly side-eyes Shoto, who is looking at his soba noodles as if trying to tell them he wanted to die. Izuku swallows. Of course Shoto didn't return his feelings, but Shoto was still a good friend, his best friend. He didn't deserve to get lumped with Izuku of all the people so disgracefully. I'm sorry, Izuku whispers, and Shoto blinks, looking at Izuku in surprise. For what? It's not like you're behind this play. Why do you keep apologizing for things you never did? Shoto asks, frowning in confusion. Izuku lets out a surprised laugh, and Shoto just shrugs, eyes lighter. Habit, I guess. Izuku asks, smiling. Shoto then playfully narrows his eyes at him. Izuku recognizes the movement as playful because of how brightly Shoto's eyes are shining right now. Did you actually hire these players to do this though? Izuku shakes in laughter, as Shoto points a finger at him. I discovered the truth. You discovered nothing. Izuku wheezes out, laughing even more. No, I found it out. I admit to nothing. Izuku says with a grin, making Shoto give him the "I'm watching you" gesture, causing Izuku to laugh. I didn't know you had a sense of humor. Izuku jokes, snickering. This again. Shoto says loftily, though his voice is warm with amusement. Izuku grins, elbowing Shoto, who elbows him back with a small smile on his own face. Not all is rosy during the play, however, because at the end, there is an actor playing his father who, with very gaudy special effects mind you, defeats the Avatar. The people cheer loudly when the actor makes a pompous speech. Izuku just stares. If only these people knew that world domination hadn't been his father's plan at all. His father just wanted his brother back. Izuku remembers talking to Momo about this and he looks at her in worry, watching her haunted expression. Momo will be fine, Shoto says, quietly. Izuku blinks, roused out of his thoughts, and turns to face Shoto, who is watching the play end with a thoughtful look in his eyes. Something on your mind, Shoto? Izuku asks, worried. Shoto purses his lips. You told us your father wanted to end the Avatar cycle to bring back his brother. Correct. Izuku nods. He hasn't shared that with the people. Izuku shakes his head. No. Too complicated. The nobles and the advisors would accuse father of not caring for the Fire Nation and there would be open rebellion. Plus, the people don't know the specifics of the Avatar cycle, and of father's secrets. Not as we do, anyway. Izuku explains, clasping his hands. Shoto nods, humming thoughtfully. 9 centuries. 9 generations of hunting down the Avatar. Izuku says, eyes closed. We will win, you know. Izuku's eyes flick over to where Shoto's contemplatively staring at the stage. His eyes are bright with a determined sheen to them, however, one that Izuku remembers finding when Shoto had confessed to being the painted spirit. The same conviction, fire and strength is there in Shoto's words, even now, and Izuku finds himself gaining a little hope from it too. You're amazing, Shoto. Izuku finds himself thinking wistfully, and he looks down at the scars he gained from this journey, the ones he would not give up anything for, a little more at peace. And how do you know? Izuku asks, voice quiet. Shoto's face is set, resolute and unwavering. Because we won't stop fighting until we win. That's how I know. Izuku smiles tremulously, drawing strength from Shoto's presence next to him. You're right. Izuku whispers, and Shoto smiles. This is it. Shigaraki's comet. Shoto and Izuku are flying their way to the Fire Nation's palace courtyard on Denki's back, after Momo's strange disappearance. Shoto notes the tense and worried lines on the other's face, concerned. Though, we're about to get involved in the heart of the war. Izuku will have to fight his own family. Despite everything they've done to him, he'll still feel guilty about it, regardless. Izuku's father has now declared himself the emperor of all, leaving Tamura to be Fire Lord. Izuku had explained his plan quite clearly. To obtain the right of succession as Fire Lord, I either get my brother to name me his heir or challenge him to an Agni Kai. He'll accept and well, I'll have to win this. Are you sure this will work? Momo asks, concerned. Izuku's gaze is steely. It has to. I'll need somebody to have my back though, just in case. I can't trust Tamura here. I'll go with you. Izuku turns, surprised as Shoto gets up from where he's seated on the grass. Shoto? Shoto faces him, unmoving. We can take him down, if the time calls for it, can't we? Izuku, I told you, we can win this. Shoto says, sitting closer to the prince. Izuku sighs. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about Momo. Shoto shakes his head. You're underestimating Momo. Shoto says, gently. Izuku exhales. I'm sorry, don't be. Momo will win. We'll win. I told you this already. Shoto reminds him, and Izuku turns back to smile wearily. For the world's sake. I hope so. Izuku says quietly. The palace is becoming larger by the second, and with a mournful groan, Denki lands. Izuku jumps off gracefully while Shoto slides down Denki's side, both of them exchanging a determined, grim look before walking into the palace. There, at the palace courtyard's center, Tamura is seated on an ornate throne, clutching onto its arms with a look Shoto can't place. The sage holding the crown notices Izuku and Shoto, gawking. What are you waiting for, you fucking imbecile? Crown me, Tamura screeches. Izuku walks up to them, gait confident and steady, standing a good distance away from them. Sorry, Tamura, Izuku says quietly, menace lurking in his voice in a way Shoto hasn't seen before. His tone is not apologetic at all. You. Tamura snarls, hissing at him from his throne. Me. Izuku says simply. He points to Tamura, jaw grit. But you're not becoming Fire Lord today. Or ever. I am. Tamura cackles loudly. It's an unnerving sound, one that causes Shoto to look on with disgust. You're going to be Fire Lord? Don't make me laugh? Tamura shrieks, laughing loudly. Izuku's gaze is unyielding, but there is a smolder of fury behind those seemingly calm eyes. I thought a Fire Lord was supposed to take all threats to the throne seriously. Or are you already? Izuku's voice drops an octave, threatening. Failing at your duty? Tamura's eyes narrow. Shut up, you useless shit. I'm not going to face me down in an Agni Kai, or accept that you're already an incompetent Fire Lord. Izuku says lowly, green eyes blazing. Tamura's eyes bulge with rage, but Izuku only faces him down. Shoto doesn't move. Izuku's already made his decision. Shoto's only here to help, after all. Tamura gets up from the throne, his movements spastic and twitching. Shoto stiffens, discomfited by the way Tamura seems so unhinged. His head is twitching to the side every few seconds, hair disheveled, but Izuku is only calm, ruffled by nothing save for the wind. Fine. You want to get burned again so easily. Tamura hisses, voice scratchy and malicious, growing louder with each word. Your little boyfriend here already screamed like a pathetic little brat when you refused to die the first time. I wonder what he's going to do when you actually, finally drop dead. Tamura shrieks, laughing with his head thrown back. Shoto says nothing, for there is nothing to say to a maniac. When Shoto looks at Izuku, however, he's shocked at what he sees. Izuku's jaw is clenched so hard, a vein is ticking from his neck. His neck is tight, the muscles tense. His narrowed green eyes are simmering with furious intensity and his fists are shaking. He inhales, exhaling out steam from his mouth shortly afterwards. You will not lay a finger on Shoto. This fight is between you and me, Tamura. Izuku growls out, voice raw and guttural. Tamura smiles darkly. Is that so, little brother? If only things were better. He says, swaying uncontrollably as he walks, hands stretched to release lightning. Izuku swings one foot backwards, and pushes one foot forward, readying himself to release fire. Shoto swallows. You never wished for things to get better. Izuku says quietly, words lost to the wind. Tamura punches the air in front of him, a billow of blue flames spreading out almost mesmerizingly, the heat suffocating Shoto. But Izuku doesn't even flinch. Instead, bringing his hands up and jumping forward, bringing his hands now down in front of him, bending large flames with each hand that merge to collide with Tamura's flames, causing them all to spread apart and miss. The heat causes Shoto's face to sweat, and his hair to stick to every part of him sticky and uncontrollable. Denki groans pitifully, and Shoto closes his eyes, his mind inadvertently flashing to Tuya. Tuya had sneered at him, cackled at him, taunted him, hurt his friends, hurt Natsuo, in front of him, and since Shoto had never been that close with him, he hadn't minded. Yes, it had been painful, to know that in another life, they would have been close. It hurts him so damn much, that even after everything Tuya had done to him and his friends, he found himself longing for his brother's presence. Why did you do what you did, Tuya? Shoto had asked, and all Tuya had given was a bitter smile, one that told Shoto everything he had needed to know, and the shadow of his tainted, forgotten father had never loomed longer in his life. Shoto knew Tuya had been abused terribly by their bastard of a father, but he hadn't known how much until Tuya had shown him the scars, teetering off the edge of insanity as he did so. I won't let that happen to anyone else. The Fire Nation is doing the right thing. You wouldn't understand. You grew up the happiest out of all four of us, Tuya had whispered, and Shoto had been devastated, as Tuya slipped away, back to the Fire Nation. Watching Izuku grit his jaw as he fought against Tamura, Shoto swallows. Tuya. Where are you? Tell me you're safe, Tuya. Please. I want to look for you, but I don't know if you'll let me. Please. Please be safe, Tuya. The heat rages even further, reminding Shoto of what's going on. Shoto knows it's just as terrible for Izuku. In a different way, we used to play with the turtle ducks as children, with mother watching us, you know. Tamura often taught me how to play all the games the other children would play, Izuku had told him, when he let himself be more open to Shoto. To know that this brother, hell-bent on degrading and killing Izuku, was the same as the one who had attempted to reach out to him. Shoto exhales, stricken. If the world was such that siblings had to fight each other to death, then it was already dying, Shoto thinks, head bowed. He hears the flames roaring and rushing, the heat searing itself onto him like a brand. When he opens his eyes, buildings are set on flames, orange and blue. Shoto would have found it beautiful if he hadn't felt the destructive fumes from them. Smoke catches in his lungs, and Shoto coughs briefly. Izuku punches a powerful, raw blast of fire towards Tamura, who counters it with a blast of azure flames. He then jumps and bends flames towards Izuku with kicks, who braces himself by pushing the flames away by bending a wall of fire with a swipe of his arm. The force of the flames pushes him back, but Izuku doesn't fall. The flames eventually fan out and collapse, and Izuku's ragged breathing is a death omen to Shoto, who finds his hands are shaking. Izuku, however, isn't backing down, swiping a fist upward to bend flames large enough to slice Tamura's incoming flames. Tamura is breathing heavily too, eyes manic and wide with something Shoto cannot identify for the life of him for all of a moment, before he realizes that Tamura is frightened. And Shoto watches with widened eyes and bated breath, as Izuku spins and kicks flames towards Tamura much as the latter had done earlier, but these flames are larger, stronger, enough to push Tamura down to the ground. Tamura cries out in pain, and Shoto sees Izuku falter, back hunched over with something more visceral than pain, and Shoto's breath catches as he sees tears fall from Izuku's face. Tamura then gets back up, and Shoto wants to plead, to stop, do something. But this is Izuku's fight, and all Shoto do is step in if things go too south for him. Tamura's hair is disastrously unkempt now, and he's panting like a rabid dog, scowling at Izuku. His eyes then fall on Shoto, before a twisted smile forms on his face and he raises two twitching fingers, lightning sparking out of them. Shoto can do nothing but watch, as Izuku turns momentarily to see where the lightning is headed for, his horrified eyes momentarily flashing blue due to the lightning behind them, before he screams, no. Gutturally, running for the lightning, and Shoto stares in mute horror, legs frozen to the ground. There's a flash of blue, surrounded by clouds of smoke. The smell suffocates Shoto, and he stares, only hoping that Izuku hasn't. It's Ba Sing Se all over again. Izuku's fallen body is crumpled on the ground, spasming as lightning sparks out of his body every few seconds. He's moaning in pain, and one hand clutched close to his chest as he wheezes heavily, and Shoto falls to his knees, unable to even move, as he tries to process what just happened. Izuku took a bolt of lightning to the heart. For him. Why? Shoto wants to scream. Because why? Why would Izuku do this for him? Izuku was supposed to win this. Izuku wasn't supposed to. No screaming. That's a shame. Tamura hollers with dark glee, and Shoto swallows, getting up on one knee and glaring at Tamura. This is what I came here for. Enough is enough, you bastard, Shoto snarls out, raising his hands and bending the water from the canals, aiming it at Tamura. Tamura, too busy reveling in his supposed win, doesn't notice the water headed for him and gets blasted into a building with enough force to cause the building to collapse on top of him. Tamura rises from the debris, lightning crackling around him in spastic bursts, and Shoto readies another splurge of water, this time bending it to the ground and causing it to freeze into jagged spikes of ice, trailing all the way to Tamura, who growls and blasts it with lightning, just as Shoto had expected it. It takes Shoto all of seconds to blast Tamura into yet another building with another splurge of water. Tamura groans out in pain and Shoto, bending ice under his feet, slides over to where the bastard is, before bending a column of water to freeze itself across Tamura, who gasps and sputters, trying to get himself free. Shoto spots a nearby chain and grabs it, but at that moment, Tamura blasts himself free and bends a current of lightning at Shoto, who ducks and slides his way across to the other side of Tamura before swinging it over his head and looping it around the now deranged firebender's abdomen. Tamura growls, struggling to get free, but Shoto has other plans. With an inhale, Shoto bends the water from his gourd with an upward swipe of one hand, pointing it at Tamura, who then gets frozen completely. Shoto ties the free end of the chain to a sewer grate, before fully extending both of his hands towards the frozen Tamura, whose mouth is moving and uttering curses. Shoto bends the ice to a watery rope across Tamura and the midsection of the chain, pulling the water such that Tamura is now tied to the throne he had sat so proudly on a while ago. Shoto then bends the water to freeze Tamura's abdomen, before tightening the chain from the sewer grate's end. Tamura shrieks and howls, blue fire raging itself out of his mouth in a poor imitation of a dragon, breathing heavily as sobs wreck themselves out of him. Shoto hears none of that though. He runs till he finds he can see Izuku's body once more, and turns him over gently, checking his pulse. Izuku is breathing, albeit weakly. When Izuku is turned over, he groans and opens his eyes, and when they find Shoto's own, he smiles wobblily. Shoto doesn't speak or move, his hands and fingers moving over to the starry scar over Izuku's chest, water flowing around it in ripples. Izuku grunts feebly, breathing much more steady as Shoto heals him. Thank you, Shoto, Izuku whispers, and Shoto has half a good mind to reprimand him, but the expression on Izuku's face stops all the words, causing them to choke his throat. Izuku's smile is wide, eyes crinkled softly at the corners as they shine up at him with a tenderness that's causing Shoto to tremble. I think I should be thanking you, Izuku. Shoto says quietly, bending over so his hair hides his face, the tears he's trying to stop from falling, because then it just makes his fear so much more real, and Shoto is tired, so unbelievably tired of fear, he just wants to be as strong as Izuku can be, even though that's impossible. But then, doesn't everybody cry? Shoto shakes, letting his tears fall on Izuku even as he heals the other, even as Tamura's shrieking and sobbing from somewhere. He sees Izuku's weak breathing, the way Izuku's eyes are glazed over with so much pain. Why? Shoto gasps out, glaring at Izuku. Izuku just smiles softer, letting a silence descend before speaking. I guess. I couldn't stand seeing you hurt by someone who wanted to kill me, you know. He coughs out, and Shoto gapes at him. They wanted me. They should kill me, instead of trying to hurt you. I don't want to see you hurt. He says honestly, voice fragile. His hand twitches, and Shoto watches the blurred thing reach out to Shoto's forearm with a squeeze. Shoto just bows his head, tears boiling his now widened eyes, as he registers Izuku's words. Are you seriously telling me I'm worth risking the future of the world? Shoto wants to gasp out in incredulity, but under the face of Izuku's confidence, effervescent and blinding as the sun, he finds himself too terrified to seek the answer to that question. Because he already knows the answer to that question, and Shoto cries further, even as he heals Izuku, no one's ever held him that close, why did it have to be Izuku? What did Izuku even see in him to get hurt so badly? Please don't cry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Shoto, please. Izuku croaks out, and Shoto stares at him. Those words shouldn't reassure him, but they do so anyway, because it lets him know that Izuku realized how hurting himself would cause me to worry. Shoto thinks heavily, and he looks at Izuku again. You'd do it again though. Shoto says, swallowing. Izuku chuckles roughly. I suppose. But isn't that what we're fighting for? A world where we won't have to watch the people important to us die in front of us. Izuku asks softly, and Shoto lets out a huff. You can't stop yourself from sacrificing yourself, so you expect the freaking world to accommodate your tendencies to do so. Shoto asks roughly, making Izuku laugh. I guess. Shoto gives him an unimpressed look, making Izuku grin. Izuku's grin softens in a way Shoto can't handle though, and once Shoto is done, he helps Izuku get up. Thank you, Izuku says, and Shoto regards him for a moment. Always. Shoto says, voice just as quiet as Izuku's is. Izuku smiles radiantly up at him for a moment, his hair and the torn ends of his clothes fluttering in the wind. He then turns to see his brother unhinged from reality, expression somber as he rests a warm hand on Shoto's shoulder. Shoto closes his eyes, only praying that Momo's won. Otherwise, he would have nearly lost Izuku for nothing. What now? Shoto asks, softly. Izuku's eyes only stare forward with a frightening intensity. We hold our breath, and wait for victory, Shoto. When Momo walks away after their addressing of the Fire Nation, Izuku isn't expecting to run into Shoto. But he supposes, that's the charm of their meetings, they never do expect to run into each other, after all. Izuku bumps into someone, and quickly steps back to apologize, only to find that it's Shoto, who's staring down at him sheepishly. Izuku finds himself blushing but coughs, realizing that there's no way Shoto feels that way for somebody like him, not after Shoto knows all of him by now, so he just smiles wobblily up at the younger boy. That was a good speech, Shoto says, eyes flicking to his right in something akin to embarrassment. Izuku blinks, before smiling wider, relaxing. Thank you. I mean, it wasn't even much. Izuku says, grinning. No, it was very inspiring. Shoto says sincerely, and Izuku can smell smoke already. You give me way too much credit. Izuku grumbles, and Shoto laughs. I don't, really. I say it as it is. Shoto says, eyes shining. Izuku blinks, kind of taken aback at the expression on Shoto's face. It's happy and peaceful in a way that only causes Izuku's heart to ache, because he wants Shoto to smile like that for him, but all Izuku can do is make Shoto express grief. He supposes it's better this way. You still give me too much credit. Izuku says, throat caught up at the realization that he's never going to be able to love Shoto. Shoto deserves a lot better than him, anyhow. Izuku. Izuku bites on his lip, looking up at Shoto with a forced smile he hopes the other doesn't catch on it. I'll see you. You've got to get back home, right? Shoto blinks, looking quite befuddled. Well, yes, but that's not for another few weeks actually. In fact, I wanted to tell you something. Shoto says, swallowing and looking away, his ears red. Izuku blinks, straightening up. You do. Shoto nods, biting on his lip before muttering something that suspiciously sounded like, stupid Natsu, before he sighs. Izuku. I think I've known this for a while, but, he scowls, scratching the back of his neck, looking annoyed before exhaling. I think. Izuku just blinks, quite confused and worried as to what Shoto's trying to say and wondering if Shoto should even say it. It's clearly causing him a lot of distress. Are you okay? Shoto huffs. No, I'm not, because I keep thinking about you. Izuku blinks, gawking. Me? Wait. His brow creases in concern. Is it about the scar? He laughs, not noticing Shoto's dumbfounded look of surprise. I told you, you healed it already. Plus, it's not that bad anymore. You don't have to worry about that. Shoto just stares at him, jaw hinged. No, he starts slowly, shaking his head. Izuku, Please listen to me. Izuku blinks. Of course. What is it? Shoto exhales. Izuku, I like you. Shoto says slowly, looking very disgruntled. Izuku blinks, quite touched but not quite certain as to why Shoto wants to tell him this. Of course. That's when it hits him. Shoto wouldn't be embarrassed to tell Izuku he likes him, it's a given, they're friends. Nobody would be embarrassed to tell somebody they liked them unless. But there was no way. Shoto wouldn't. Izuku wasn't. Are you confessing to me? Izuku asks, gaping at the younger boy. Shoto's lips purse in pity, and he sighs, rubbing his forehead. I thought I was supposed to be the emotionally stunted one. Izuku gapes. Hey, first off, I am not emotionally stunted. Come on. Shoto raises an eyebrow challengingly, and Izuku wilts, pouting. Okay, fair. But in my defense, I thought this was a dream. Shoto just sighs. It's not, Izuku. He says gently, before his eyes dance with mirth in that enchanting way of theirs. And, you said, first off. Izuku makes a face at him, but then blinks in curiosity. Secondly, who called you emotionally constipated? Shoto shrugs. Momo. Ochako. Natsu. I could go on and on. You're not emotionally constipated. What in Agni's name? Shoto smirks a little. Nice to see you think so. But back to the original topic, it's a yes, I am indeed confessing that I like you. He bites on his lip, his expression softening. I know I'm going back home, but I want you to know that I really like you. He says, voice almost shy as he rubs at the back of his neck, looking sideways. Izuku pinches himself for a moment and screams, because he's an idiot. Shoto looks quite alarmed, but Izuku holds up a hand. Just checked if I was dreaming. I'm serious, I didn't think you liked me like that. Izuku says, swallowing. Shoto raises an eyebrow, but Izuku can see the waver in his confidence and he quickly starts talking. Shoto, I'm in love with you, and no, Izuku, you can't say that. He'll run away and Izuku inhales a loud gulp of air. I've really liked you. Still do. I like you, a lot. Izuku says, and Shoto blinks, eyes wide. Oh, so you like me too. Izuku doesn't know what propels him to do it. Probably something about the adorably confused expression on the other's face, or maybe something in him just snapped, but all he knows is this: he cups Shoto's cheeks and soundly kisses the other, smirking into the kiss when he hears Shoto squeaking. Shoto then regains his balance and loops his arms around Izuku's neck, bringing him closer with a delighted sigh, causing Izuku to hum. When Izuku pulls back, Shoto's lips are red and glossy with saliva, parted in surprise. Izuku grins. Was that your first kiss? Izuku asks after a few moments of thought, surprised. Shoto's face goes very red. Shut up. Izuku laughs heartily, and still keeps laughing when Shoto kisses him this time, so unbelievably happy. Shoto's first thought upon meeting Inko was that she was so much like her son. He lets Izuku alone, to hug and reunite with the mother who was cast away by her own husband because he felt he was protecting her by doing so. But when Inko's gentle eyes fall on him, even as she hugs both Izuku and Eri, her adopted daughter, Shoto's breath hitches and Inko smiles warmly at him. When Shoto hugs Inko along with Eri and Izuku, he notes how it's not so different from being hugged by his own mother, and he accepts it with a smile on his face. It's Shoto that grounds him during this tenuous first year of rule. There are assassinations, hallucinations of his dead father, visages of non-existent enemies at every turn and corner, Tamura's taunts, and if not for Shoto's warm, gentle words, Izuku is not sure he would have pulled through. He's thankful for his friends Momo, Ochako, Kyoka, Natsuo, but in the end, it's always been Shoto. When Shoto whispers that he is not weak for falling prey to the anguish that befalls him upon all of these, Izuku sobs and Shoto holds him closer, kissing his forehead. You could never be weak, Izuku. You're the strongest person I know. Shoto whispers, the light of the moon gently soaking them, and Izuku sobs further, resolving to always be there for Shoto. The issue of Tuya had remained and lingered, haunting Shoto with its disappearance, but when Izuku knocked on his guest door politely, Shoto got up, only to see a tender smile on his boyfriend's face. There's someone who wants to see you. Izuku murmurs, and Shoto blinks, frowning in surprise when Izuku turns away, only to see only to see Tuya. Shoto's knees buckle, his hands shaking. Tuya. Shoto whispers, and Tuya, dressed in Fire Nation armor, only scratches the back of his burned neck awkwardly, attempting to smile at him. Surprise? Tuya asks, shrugging. Shoto turns to Izuku, who smiles. Remember when Chisaki's house burnt down? Chisaki. Shoto remembers him. A former advisor to the Fire Lord, Izuku's adoptive little sister Eri had been under that despicable man's roof, subjected to his abuse, until his house had mysteriously burnt down. Shoto's eyes widen as he regards Tuya. That's because Eri had been abused by him a lot, Izuku is saying somberly before it brightens again as he smirks at Tuya, who rolls his eyes and mutters something under his breath about how the new Fire Lord is an insufferable brat, and Tuya stepped in to take care of it. That's where Mom found Eri. Shoto widens his eyes, turning to look at Tuya, who sighed. Listen, could you fucking leave? He directs at Izuku with a scowl. Izuku raises his hands with a grin, before it softens at Shoto. I'll see you. Shoto nods hastily, before looking at Tuya, who sighs. Izuku leaves, his gait having a new spring to it which is rendered ridiculous due to his Fire Lord robes. Tuya sighs. Shoto, I'm sorry, he says, facing Shoto. Shoto swallows. No, you're right. You defended the Fire Lord not because of what he did but because of what you went through. And Enji. Shoto swallows again, bile rising up his throat at the thought of the man he had never met. Enji was a terrible person, and Natsu told me enough. But you're right, I'll never understand, Tuya, what Enji put you through, but you really are like Mom, huh? Shoto blinks, looking at Tuya in surprise and befuddlement. The latter is wearing a slight smile. You really are like Mom. That's good, Tuya says quietly. Shoto blinks again, instinctively clutching onto his necklace. Tuya laughs, and the sound is fond. See you around, kid. Your boyfriend gave me a pretty neat offer, so we'll be seeing a lot more of each other, Tuya says, smiling. Huh? Really? Shoto asks dumbly. Tuya grins. Your boyfriend is a really smart cookie. He asked me if I wanted to lead a special sort of force against scumbags in power who abused it. So I guess I'll be seeing a lot more of you. Shoto drops his jaw and Tuya laughs again. What? Tuya grinned. Yep. Lot to process, I get that, but hey, Tuya's grin softens. It means we'll get to know each other better. I'd like to try to be a better older brother. Shoto doesn't know what compels him to do it, but he hugs Tuya tightly, causing Tuya to wheeze out. He doesn't see Tuya's eyes widen to the size of saucers, nor does he register that Tuya is biting on his lip, before awkwardly enveloping his arms around him, patting him even more awkwardly. He doesn't see Tuya smile gently. Why don't you become the ambassador for the Southern Water Tribe? Shoto spits out all of his tea on the table, choking on it. Izuku stares at the mess with a very unaffected air. It's the 4th year of Izuku's rule, now, and he's been seeking to better mend relations with the water tribes, considering he antagonized them personally. Izuku doesn't understand why Shoto's so surprised he's heralded as the greatest waterbender in the history of waterbenders, since Avatar Ryunosuke himself, Avatar Nana's predecessor. The water tribes look up to Shoto, who petitioned, for equality amongst waterbenders, and they admire him well. It's a perfect move if you ask Izuku, and yes, it does provide an incentive for Shoto to stay here and to gain the approval from the other advisors should Izuku ever pursue a marriage. But Izuku only has the Fire Nation's interests at heart, absolutely. Izuku can hear his father scoffing from his grave. Tamura suddenly scoffs from inside his room at the mental health ward. Okay, so Izuku is indeed full of bison shit, yes, but you can't blame him, he just wants to spend more time with his boyfriend. Izuku barely gets enough time as it is, considering Shoto is busy heading the reconstruction of the Southern Water Tribe and encouraging waterbending among the folk. Izuku is so proud of Shoto, glad he finally gets the chance to actively take part in something he very much wants to do, but also, Shoto should not have encouraged it by saying that he would like to spend more time with Izuku. It was all on Shoto. What? Izuku loves Shoto a lot. Sue him for falling in love with the guy who healed all of his scars and who was also his best friend, and for finding a solution to their problem of having less of each other in their lives. It is as Ochako had said wisely, one must chase their own happiness. Granted, Izuku never followed that happiness due to reasons, but there's something different about Shoto, something that fills Izuku with warmth and passion, and it's something he doesn't want to let go of. Where did this come from? Shoto sputters out, staring at Izuku. Izuku shrugs. The Northern Water Tribe chieftain named your brother its ambassador. Since you're in charge for repairs in the Southern Water Tribe, I thought you could offer us insight on how to further improve relations and inform us on what aid we could offer. Shoto glares at him. You and I both know those stuffy old advisors would turn their noses up at me, and I'm not sure I have the patience for that. Izuku chuckles. They won't dare to do so. You're underestimating yourself, Shoto. Shoto bites on his lip. It's an honor, yes, but the tribe comes first. I'll have to see if it's amenable. To Izuku, that sounds like a yes already, and it is a yes, but instead of excitedly poring over it, he simply sips his tea and smiles indulgently because that's honestly more fun and a lot more dignified, really. Izuku likes the newfound control over his dignity a lot better. Take your time. Shoto quirks a scarlet eyebrow in dubious confusion, but Izuku just smiles at him over his cup of tea. Izuku just grins very broadly when Shoto informs him that he does accept, and that the tribe accepted as well. Why do I feel like there's something else you're happy about, Izuku? Shoto asks dryly, as Izuku peppers kisses all over his neck. Because you're here with me, Izuku says innocently. Shoto stares at the wall in stony red-faced silence even as Izuku holds him, still peppering kisses all over his neck. The advisors chafe at Shoto's blunt way of speaking and his lack of courtesies, but honestly, Izuku couldn't care less. It is as he believed Shoto's quick thinking helps them rebuild the Southern Water Tribe faster, as they see in the coming months. Trade deals improve far better than the advisors predicted, and Izuku is just a very happy Fire Lord, considering the advisors are forced to admit that Shoto is a lot more competent at his job than they had pegged him to be. Plus Shoto looks very good in Fire Nation clothing, so it's a bonus, really. Shoto realizes he's in love with Izuku when they're 20 years old, watching the sun set over the mountains of the South Pole, Izuku staring up at the sun in awe. No matter how many winters I spend here with you, this place is simply gorgeous, you know? Izuku happily whispers, something warmer than simple everyday fondness welling up in Shoto. It is. Shoto says quietly, leaning on the snow-covered railing of the balcony from their room, resting his head on Izuku's shoulder. They stay like that, Izuku smiling up brightly at the sun, and that's when Shoto thinks about what Izuku truly is to him. You're light, Shoto thinks absently, warm and encompassing, always kind. You're the kind of guy who'll destroy problems and crush them even if you don't have to. You burst into lives like light, and I love you for that. Shoto feels his face heat up, his eyes on Izuku's softened smile, which is now directed at him. You seem tired. Want to spend the rest of the night in bed? Izuku asks quietly, turning so he can comfortably stroke Shoto's head. I love you. It's something he's always known, since Izuku took that bolt of lightning for him. Yes, he liked him before that, but that star-shaped scar, Shoto thinks, absently tracing the outline of it over Izuku's coat with his fingers, that's what let him know that Izuku was someone he would go to all extents for, someone he would always want to know more about. Shoto hums in affirmation to Izuku's question, and the older man smiles. Okay. He says, and he just quietly leads Shoto to the bed, one very large and comfortable arm around Shoto's shoulders. Izuku is indeed taller than him now, and Shoto is very amicable to this fact. He doesn't know why he admitted this to himself today, Shoto muses to himself as Izuku cuddles him, but he supposes it's long overdue and admitted truth anyway. I love you, Shoto thinks again, something stirring in his chest as he watches Izuku's peacefully sleeping face, fingers on where Izuku's scar used to be. And it's a terrifying truth, one Shoto wants to keep to himself, but the weight of those words grant him peace too, paradoxically enough. That's okay, somehow Shoto reassures himself. And somehow, when he does tell it to Izuku on a day spent in familiar, rebuilt courtyards, the tears in Izuku's eyes give strength to this conviction, that it will be okay, and Shoto kisses them away, as Izuku holds him. I love you too, Shoto, so much, Izuku whispers it with the passion Shoto's always admired about him, and if that doesn't steal his breath away, he doesn't know what else will. Shoto is always beautiful, But Izuku will never forget the way he smiles softly at him from where they're standing next to each other on their wedding day. Izuku will never forget the way those eyes twinkle up at him far brighter than stars could ever hope to. The way Shoto's face, usually so regal in its frigidity, is softer at the edges with a comforting warmth only Izuku gets to see, and it's too much for him because he tears up and he kisses Shoto's head, causing the other to chuckle. Proposing to him had been a headache. Either the advisors got in the way, or their friends got in the way, or the blazing turtle ducks had gotten in the way. But now, well, it's worth all of that. It's a moonlit night when they're finally alone, far away from the crowds and appreciative, welcoming guests. It's humbling and friendly to know how many of them wished happiness for their married life, but it's each other's presences in the absence of others that make this day worth it, and Shoto, already bare and stripped on the bed, watches him decidedly as Izuku strips of his own robes. Izuku, Shoto calls softly, already heady with anticipation, watching as Izuku slowly strips himself, smiling and watching at him from the corner of a mischievously glinting green eye. Shoto isn't known for his patience, however, so he decides to make sure Izuku has a reason to strip faster, lying back on his elbows and spreading his legs, calling Izuku once more. "You're not very patient, are you?" Izuku murmurs, voice husky. Shoto doesn't respond, and he licks his lips slowly, watching Izuku all the while. Izuku swallows, before he gets on the bed. Shoto cups his face, and Izuku laughs breathily, thumbing his husband's plush lower lip with a calloused thumb, smiling at the way Shoto sighs out in pleasure with a soft moan. Lips parted wantonly for a moment just before Izuku smirks, retracting his thumb and pressing too short a kiss to Shoto's lips, causing him to whine unconsciously, leaning in closer to Izuku with hooded eyes. "You Fire Nation people in your heavy robes. So much time to take them off, spirits." Shoto murmurs in the minuscule space between their lips, still cupping Izuku's face with his hands, causing the other to chuckle. Shoto feels a little thrill rush in him at feeling the vibrations of the gesture, at being so close to Izuku. Traditions demand a lot. Izuku says in a low voice, kissing Shoto soundly, hands steadily but greedily exploring every inch of bare skin he can find, causing Shoto to shiver into the kiss. Somehow or the other, Shoto falls on the bed, Izuku straddling him as he holds the other's face, now kissing a trail down Shoto's neck. Once his lips find his shoulder, he sucks on it, causing Shoto to grip onto the other's broad shoulders, the feeling of the pads of his fingers on the ridges of Izuku's muscles causing heat to pool deep and low within him, moaning loudly when his husband's curious tongue swipes over a pert nipple. Izuku's eyes glint, right from where he's intent on littering Shoto's chest with kisses, and he smirks, before pinching one nipple between his fingers, and sucking on the other, tugging on it with his teeth, and Shoto feels so good, so wrecked already, and he wants more, gasping and moaning at the sensations flooding him. He can already feel his erection rising, and he curses Izuku for taking his damn sweet time. "This is something to keep in mind for the future," Izuku murmurs rather smugly, hand on the plane of Shoto's abdomen, stroking it slowly, before adjusting himself better, lips already on Shoto's cock. Show you HNGH, something to keep in mind for the future." Shoto hisses in between breathy gasps, thrusting his hips, causing Izuku's inviting mouth to swallow more of him, but much to his petulance, Izuku only takes it well, and Shoto realizes, with a hitch in his breathing as he finds the other running one rough hand through Shoto's hair, that Izuku is going to have his way with him this whole night. Not something he had expected, but oh, spirits, Shoto would not mind that at all. He had absolutely no complaints with that at all. "Have me, take me, I'm yours," Shoto thinks between every second of coherent thought Izuku graciously allows him when he isn't fucking his own mouth on Shoto's cock, for every moment before Izuku relentlessly, passionately makes love to him. "I'm yours, Izuku, I'm yours," Shoto thinks as if in prayer, tears of pleasure streaming down his cheeks for every whispered praise, for every tenderly murmured word that reaches his ears. "And you're mine, aren't you?" Shoto thinks to himself hazily, when Izuku is smiling down at him, after they've both exhausted themselves. That hadn't been easy, yes, but somehow it had happened. "Yes, you are," Shoto thinks with a smile, kissing one of Izuku's freckles. "What's that for?" Izuku laughs out, as Shoto's hand rests on that scar on his heart from so many years ago almost possessively, voice husky and deep with sleep. "Everything," Shoto says sleepily, And Izuku's eyes soften even more, lips softly pressing themselves to Shoto's own, in a tender gesture that has Shoto's knees shaking just a little, and he smiles wider, eyes drifted off to sleep, as he takes in the comfort of knowing this is what the rest of his life is going to be like. Shoto couldn't wait. Hey, you can't go near here. Chuya barks, shooing poor Natsuo away. The rest of the Bao Quan are also busy shooing everyone away from the corridor leading to the Fire Lord's chambers, and Chuya is already having a headache. Natsuo stares at him, big gray eyes wide. What? Why? I just wanted wine. Chuya rubs his forehead. Natsu, do you see the freaking Brother Lord or Shoto anywhere? Natsuo stares at him. You mean the Fire Lord? Chuya glares at him. That's what I said. Answer the question, dumbass. Natsuo slowly shakes his head. No, but what's that got to do with me going into there to get wine? Chuya pinches the bridge of his nose. Natsu. They went, he says this very slowly. Into there. He points to the wing, where the Bao Quan are screaming at people not to go there and that wine will be served elsewhere. To have sex. Natsuo stares at him for a moment before glaring at Chuya, face paling. Why would you tell me that? Natsuo hisses, clutching on to Chuya's shoulders like a madman. Chuya stares at him. If I have to hear them fucking themselves silly, then you need to know that too. Natsuo's face only pales further. Chuya sighs. Agni, save him. Or Tui and La could save him too. Whichever was nice to him at the moment. Did those kids enjoy the story? Izuku asks with a laugh, coming in. Shoto blinks in surprise, before smiling. Of course they did. They thought the blue spirit was cool by the way. He says with a chuckle, as Izuku sits next to him, already having some bread for the turtle ducks. He hands it to Shoto, who grins and throws some for the turtle ducks. Huh. My favorite was the part about the painted spirit. It was really beautiful, you know. Izuku says thoughtfully, stroking his stubbled chin. Shoto gives him a very deadpan stare. Ha ha, he says, making Izuku snicker into his fist. Shoto rolls his eyes, before his eyes glint at the way the turtle ducks swim towards them for more bread, elbowing Izuku, who blinks and gawks at the turtle ducks that are pointedly ignoring him. You should throw some to them too, Shoto says mischievously, smirking. Izuku gawks. No thanks. I'll pass. Shoto chuckles. They're not out for you, Izuku. Izuku scoffs. As someone who's had several people out for my blood, I know what it looks like when somebody's out for me. Hey, don't laugh, Sho. You're just being dramatic, Shoto says, chuckling. No, I'm not. I'm your husband, I think I'd know if you were dramatic or not. As if you aren't, come on Shoto, be serious. I'm always serious. Haven't you heard the guards talk about how intimidating I am? Izuku makes a humorous face before kissing Shoto's nose, causing the other to squeak a little in surprise. Hey, that was uncalled for. That was very much called for, the guards always lie. Shoto nods seriously. Of course they do. Izuku bites on his lip, before laughing at Shoto's mockingly serious face. Shoto snickers as well soon enough, the air so much lighter and so much freer than anything Izuku's known. He smiles, seeing Shoto feed the turtle ducks with an ever-beautiful smile on his face, and rests his fingers around the other's neck absently, enjoying the peace that's been a fixature in his life and that will be a fixature in his life for the rest of his days. For without a sun, there was no moon, and when there were neither, there was no light. But fortunately, Izuku has enough of light in his life right now, very much a result of the man, the love of his life, by his side. And just like the petals falling in spring, a steady trickle of happiness blooms in Izuku. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.